Chapter 4240. Well, thank you for your advice, brother. In that case, we have decided to join. Lenny nodded. Since there was no restriction on coming back, there was nothing to worry about. Otherwise, if they were separated after going in and could not come back, it would be really bad. In any case, there was nothing else for him to do here. According to the current situation, he might even have to sleep on the streets. With Huang Xiaotao's beauty, if she was accidentally discovered by others, it was very likely that she would attract trouble again. That would not be fun. It was more reliable to risk his life in Lufeng Forest. At the thought of a treasure like the universal golden dan fruit, even Lin Yi's heart was a little itchy. Although he was a master of the gold core stage who had a perfect breakthrough, in theory, it would be much easier to break through in the future than ordinary masters of the gold core stage. However, it would take a few decades for a perfect master of the gold core stage to achieve what others needed hundreds of years to do. However, if he could get the universal golden dan fruit and refine the best gold core, this time could be greatly shortened. Great! The man in cyan was overjoyed. The miasma in Lufeng Forest dissipated for a limited time. The four of them had waited for a few days. They really could not wait any longer. Today, they finally had enough people. He immediately introduced himself and said, "My name is Guo Dengtao. The other three are now waiting in the inn. I will take you there, and you can leave immediately." "All right, I'll be troubling you then, Brother Guo." Lenny nodded and immediately followed the others' footsteps with Huang Xiaodao. Squeezing through the crowd, the three of them passed through 2 streets and came to a superior room in an inn. At this moment, the 3 people in the room had been waiting here for a long time. Lenny glanced at the 3 people in the room. There were 2 men and 1 woman. Of the 2 male cultivators, one was at the late stage of gold core and the other was at the middle stage of gold core. The remaining female cultivator was at the peak of the early stage of gold core. "The 3 of you, I just found these masters from the North Island. They are willing to go to Lufeng Forest with us." Guo Dengtao took the initiative to introduce them to Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao enthusiastically. "This is Brother Chu Bubi, a great master at the late stage of gold core. This is Brother Wang Feng, a middle stage of gold core. And this is Miss Feng Hong Yu, a peak early stage of gold core. She is Senior Brother Chu Bubi's Dao companion." Lin Yi carefully looked at the 3 people again. Chu Bubi looked to be in his 30s. He had delicate features and was dressed in a long white robe, holding a paper fan in his hand. At first glance, he gave off a scholarly air, but if one looked closely, they would find that there was a hint of ruthlessness between his brows. Clearly, he wasn't as cultured and refined as he appeared to be. Wang Feng, who was sitting on the other side, also looked to be in his early 30s. He had a head of neat short hair and wore a loose gray robe. But even so, it couldn't hide his bulging muscles, which gave people a sense of competence. As for the female cultivator named Feng Hong Yu, she was covered with a layer of makeup and looked quite beautiful at first glance. However, her beauty could only be considered second-rate at best, belonging to the level of being forgotten after a single glance. Lin had always been used to seeing stunning beauties like Huang Xiaodao. He didn't feel anything about this at all. He only felt that this woman was a little exaggerated and had a high opinion of herself. Except for Chu Bubi, she didn't need to look at the others at all. "I am Bei Dao Ling Yi, and next to me is junior sister Huang. Greetings, Brother Chu, Brother Wang, Miss Feng." Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao immediately cupped their hands and greeted. The eyes of the 3 people in the room fell on Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao at the same time. They frowned slightly and showed a bit of disdain on their faces. They looked down on Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. After all, in terms of strength alone, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao, who were at the early stage of the gold core realm, were the weakest among them, so it was not surprising that they showed such expressions. "Taozi, although you're the one who organized the recruitment, aren't you too anxious and irresponsible? You're simply desperate. You found such 2 weak guys. When the time comes, not only will they not be able to help, but we also have to look after them. Aren't you dragging us down?" Feng Hong Yu glanced at Lin Yi and ridiculed them mercilessly in a condescending tone. Huang Xiaodao heard this and looked at Lin Yi, but Lin Yi frowned slightly. He He remained calm and turned to look at Guadangtao. Miss Feng, you are too serious. Guadangtao couldn't help but smile awkwardly at Lin, Yi, and Huang Xiaodao. He explained with a wry smile, it's not like you don't know the situation outside now. There are people recruiting everywhere. In this case, it's already good that we can have people to form a team. We really can't ask for too much. As far as he was concerned, being able to get both Lin, Yi, and Huang Xiaodao was already a blessing from the heavens. If there were any more rules and regulations, they wouldn't be able to find them in a short amount of time, and they wouldn't even need to go to Lufeng's forest. After all, compared to other strong teams, they could only be considered average. Only Chu Bubi, a master at the late stage of the Gold Core realm, was not as attractive as those who were led by masters at the great perfection of the Gold Core realm. Wang Feng didn't say anything, but Chu Bubi, who was sitting in the middle, nodded and made the final decision. Since you brought them here, let's go together. However, the two of you are weak, so you should take the initiative and do more chores. I'll leave the luggage to you. Okay. Lenny nodded and did not refuse. It could be seen that although Guadangtao was in charge of forming the team, the real decision-maker was Chu Bubi, a master at the late stage of the Gold Core realm. Since they had decided to go to Lufeng Forest, it was okay to keep a low profile for the time being. Since Brother Chu has said so, then I won't say anything else. But you two better have some self-awareness. Don't think about being lazy. Also, if we find some treasures, it would be good if you can follow us and drink some soup. Don't think too much. Feng Hong Yu chattered arrogantly on the side. Lin Yi didn't bother to pay attention to her. It was too degrading to argue with such an ignorant and arrogant woman. Anyway, after teleporting to Lufeng Forest, he and Huang Xiaodao could come back by themselves. At that time, he didn't need to pay attention to her anymore. Well, since the number of people is enough, let's have a good rest at night and set off tomorrow. Chu Bubi finally decided. Everyone immediately responded and went back to their rooms, but Lin, Yi, and Huang Xiaodao didn't have a room. They didn't know where to go to spend the night. Fortunately, Guadangtao was a good person. Seeing this, he took the initiative to give his room to the two of them, and he went to share a room with Wang Feng. Chapter 42-41. The next day, the group gathered early and set off for the Lufeng Road teleportation formation. According to what they had agreed, Lin Yi was responsible for carrying everyone's bags. However, Guadangtao and Wang Feng each carried a huge bag that was filled to the brim. They didn't let Lin Yi carry it for them, so no one knew what they were carrying. After squeezing through the crowd, they walked through the streets and alleys of Zhenduan City. After an hour, the six of them finally arrived at their destination, the Lufeng Road teleportation formation. Looking from afar, there was a long queue in front of them. They were all in groups of 6. Obviously, like Lin Yi's group, they were all going to Lufeng Forest for an adventure. Lin Yi raised his head and looked up. There was a round platform 100 meters in front of him, looking like it was a giant circular formation or something. There were 6 spirit jade pillars around it, 10 meters tall. It was the Lufeng's Path formation. Every once in a while, a white light would flash on the teleportation array, followed by a sharp whistling sound that cut through space. After the silence returned, the next group of people quickly ascended the stage, and their speed could not be considered too slow. They waited patiently. Seeing that the people in front of them were getting fewer and fewer, Lin Yi suddenly noticed something. Before every group went up the teleportation formation, they would take out a big bag of spiritual jade. There were about 5,000 spiritual jade, and they would give it to the person in charge of the teleportation formation. 5,000 spirit jades. That was a huge bag. Turning around, it was about the same size as the bags that Guadangtao and Wang Feng were carrying. However, other than the spirit jades that some people gave out, there were also some people who swiped their spirit jade cards directly. Brother Gua, this is... Lin Yi was stunned. He pointed at the teleportation formation and then at the bag that Guadangtao was carrying. If he wasn't wrong, it should be filled with spiritual jade. No wonder Guadangtao didn't let him take it. What? Guadangtao was stunned and only reacted after a while. He slapped his head and said, "Don't you know? You need to pay a fee to use the Lufeng Road teleportation formation. Every teleportation formation costs a lot of spiritual jade. There is no teleportation formation that people use for free, right? Use fees? Lin raised his eyebrows. It wasn't that he couldn't understand. It was just that he hadn't thought of this before. He couldn't help but ask, "You didn't tell us yesterday. How much does it cost per person?" That's my oversight, but these are all common sense. I thought you would know." Guodang Tao was speechless. Only then did he remember that Lin and Lin didn't know anything. They were practically illiterate. Guodang Tao said with a headache, 5,000 spirit jades per person is not a small amount. Don't tell me you didn't make any preparations? Why didn't you say so earlier? Lin looked at him helplessly. Beside him, Huang Xiaotao, who was wearing a veil, revealed a look of worry. After all, even if he was an expert in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, he would not be able to defeat him. 10,000 spirit jades was not a sum that could be casually taken out. At the very least, one had to make preparations in advance. TSK, from the looks of it, I can tell that they didn't prepare anything. I've already said that Taozi is hungry and can't be choosy. You brought back 2 idiots. They don't have the strength, and now they don't even have spiritual jades. Isn't this a waste of our time? Feng Hongyu took the opportunity to make sarcastic remarks. Seeing this, Chu Bubi couldn't help but frown. If Lin and Huang Xiaodao didn't have the spiritual jades prepared, the 4 of them wouldn't be able to leave. Then this trip would be in vain. You really don't have spiritual jades? The 2 of you add up to 10,000 spirit jades. I can pay for you, but don't think about taking too much of the profits from this team. Chu Bubi said in a deep voice. Moreover, after you go, you have to listen to my instructions. 10,000 spirit jades was not a small amount. Moreover, Lin and Huang Xiaodao were the weakest. What he said was pertinent. No need. We could take out 10,000 spirit jades ourselves. Lin shook his head decisively. He had noticed that after everyone had paid the spiritual jades, they would receive something that looked like a token. The person in charge of the teleportation formation would also remind them that when leaving Lufeng Forest, they would have to follow the map to the teleportation formation inside Lufeng Forest, and then use the token to activate the teleportation formation in order to teleport back. If Chu Bubi was asked to pay the spiritual jades, the token would definitely be controlled by him. After that, whether he and Huang Xiaodao could come back, and when they would come back would depend on Chu Bubi's mood. Lin didn't want such an important weakness to fall into the hands of an outsider. 10,000 spirit jades sounded like a lot. Ordinary people really couldn't take it out in a short time, but Lin was definitely an exception. He owned the Tiandan Pavilion. Just a casual day's income was at least 50,000 spirit jades. This was only the most conservative estimate. In his eyes, 10,000 spirit jades was nothing at all. On the other side of Middle Island, Tian Chan would send spiritual jades to Lin through the special channel of the Merchant Union every month. The number in his spiritual jades card had already reached a jaw-dropping astronomical figure. 10,000 spirit jades was not even a fraction. In that case, it couldn't be better. Chu Bubi was stunned and immediately said nothing. Feng Hongyu, who was next to him, still had a look of disbelief. At first glance, she was sure that Lin and Huang Xiaodao did not have strong background. If they didn't follow Chu Bubi, even she, an expert at the peak of the early Gold Core realm, might not be able to take out 10,000 spirit jades in a short time, let alone these 2 guys who had not seen much of the world at all. They definitely didn't dare to admit it in public. Feng Hongyu curled her lips disdainfully. Wait until you make a fool of yourself. Let's see how you 2 will get off the stage. Brother Ling, you can't joke about this. If you don't have it now, you might as well let senior brother Chu Bubi pay for it first. It's just a little profit. You really don't need to be embarrassed. Guodang Tao could not help but persuade him in a low voice. As for Wang Feng, who was next to him, there was no expression. Haha, Brother Gua, you worry too much. I do have enough spiritual jades. I just didn't know about this before. Lin smiled faintly. Guodang Tao wanted to say something, but stopped. However, seeing that Lin's expression did not seem to be fake, he did not say anything more. Anyway, He had already done his best to remind Lin Yi. If Lin Yi made a fool of himself, he could not blame him. Soon, it was the turn of Lin Yi and the others. Chu Bubi took the lead and swiped his spiritual jades card, including Feng Hongyu's share. Gui Dengtao and Wang Feng also handed a big sack of spiritual jades to the person in charge of the teleportation formation. Then, everyone's eyes fell on Lin. Chapter 42-42. With a faint smile, Lin immediately took out the spiritual jade card and handed it to the supervisor of the teleportation formation. Including Chu Bubi, Gui Dengtao, and the others were all stunned, especially Feng Hongyu, who could not close her mouth for a long time. Her dumbfounded expression was really wonderful. Not everyone could have a spiritual jade card. Not only did it require great strength, but it also required a strong background. After all, it was not easy to obtain the recognition of the merchant union. Even if it was a gold core expert, if he had not met Hong Zhong, Lin Yi might not have a spiritual jade card. Among the few people present, only Chu Bubi had a spiritual jade card. Feng Hongyu and the others did not have one at all. Otherwise, Gui Dengtao and Wang Feng would not have to spend so much effort to carry a bag of spiritual jade cards from so far away. At this time, everyone looked at Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao differently. Although Chu Bubi did not say anything, he looked at the two of them with a deep meaning. As for Feng Hongyu, even though she was still grumbling, she did not dare to look down on them as openly as before. After all, being able to take out a spiritual jade card meant that even if Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao were weak, they at least had a good background. Maybe they were the core disciples of some big sect or family. If they were angered, it would be a big problem if they called for a backer or something. Gui Dengtao's expression was a little surprised, but it was clear that he was a little happy. This meant that the two he found weren't completely useless. It meant that he had a good eye for things. As for Wang Feng, other than a look of surprise, he didn't have any other special expression on his face. His attitude towards the two had been the same since the beginning. He wasn't as friendly as Gui Dengtao, nor was he as disdainful as Feng Hongyu. He was impartial, neither close nor far. In fact, among the crowd, although Huang Xiaodao had followed Lin Yi all the way, she was no less surprised than the others. She had been following Lin Yi for quite some time, but she had never seen Lin Yi go out of his way to earn a lot of spiritual jades. The things he did every day had nothing to do with this, but she did not expect that he could casually swipe his card. She was really on tenterhooks for a while. However, even if she had doubts about this matter, it was impossible for her to directly ask Lin Yi about it in front of an outsider. In any case, Lin Yi was already the man she had set her sights on. She had seen all kinds of miraculous methods. In comparison, this amount of spiritual jades was nothing. No matter what, this matter had once again verified Huang Xiaodao's original understanding that so long as she followed Lin Yi, no matter what happened, she would feel at ease and steady. Gui Dengtao breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Brother Ling Yi, I didn't expect that you're not poor at all, even though you're from the North Island. You can take out 10,000 spiritual jades without any preparation, and you even have a spiritual jade card. You're really something." Gui Dengtao said with a faint smile, Spiritual jades are accumulated bit by bit over many years of tasks. As for this spiritual jade card, I just happened to meet a friend, so I was lucky. Luck is also a part of strength, Gui Dengtao said with some envy. Chu Bubi and the others looked at Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao with even more strange expressions. They secretly felt that this person might not be as simple as he looked, but they did not say anything because they were about to set off. "Okay, you can go up now." After the supervisor of the teleportation formation paid 10,000 spiritual jades, he immediately handed 2 tokens to Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao, and correspondingly 2 special maps of Lufeng Forest. At the same time, he signaled everyone to go up to the teleportation formation. According to the instructions of the supervisor of the teleportation formation, Lin Yi and the others immediately walked up to the high platform disc. They couldn't see it from below before, but now that they walked up, they found that there were various lines engraved under their feet, and all the lines combined to form a complex and mysterious formation. Lin Yi couldn't help but feel surprised. He didn't feel anything when he was standing below, but now that he was walking on the formation, he suddenly felt a strange and mysterious aura. He didn't know exactly what this feeling was, but vaguely, Lin Yi could feel that it contained an extremely brilliant magical power. Maybe in the future, when his strength increased to a certain level, he would be able to see through the various mysteries contained in this formation. However, with Lin Yi's current eyesight, he was still at the stage of not understanding it, but he could only say that there was still a long way to go. Huang Xiaodao was also secretly surprised. Although her comprehension was not as good as Lin Yi's, she could still feel this mysterious feeling. As for the others, perhaps they had seen this teleportation formation before, or even more than once or twice, and were already used to it. At this moment, there was no strange expression on their faces. In addition to the mysterious formation engraved on the main body of the teleportation formation, there were 6 small formations around it, facing the 6 huge dragon pillars. Lin Yi and the others followed the instructions of the supervisor of the teleportation formation and stood in the 6 small formations one by one. Hold your breath and don't move around. Otherwise, if there is any problem during the teleportation, we will not be responsible. The supervisor of the teleportation formation warned them and immediately opened the teleportation formation. A white light that was visible to the naked eye emerged from the center of the circular formation, and then it quickly spread, covering the entire range of the teleportation formation. Lin Yi and the others were also shrouded in the white light, and then they felt a huge suction force on their bodies, as if it was going to tear them apart. Even with the strength of an expert in the early stage of the Gold Core realm, Lin Yi still could not bear it. Fortunately, the process was not long. With a sharp whistle, the corresponding white light of the 6 dragon pillars instantly shot up to the sky, and the teleportation formation immediately returned to normal. The round platform was empty, and Lin Yi and the others had already been teleported away. Although Lufeng Forest was only at the edge of the South Island, its area was not small at all, and it had a circumference of 1,000 miles. Moreover, in the whole year, except for special times like this, almost no human cultivators would set foot on this place. Even those powerful spirit beasts, because this place was too remote, there were only a few of them. Therefore, all the natural treasures that grew here were preserved to the greatest extent, and it even became a natural treasure that everyone knew. A white light flashed in front of them, and the moment before, they were still in the teleportation formation of Zhenduan City, and the next moment, Lin Yi and the others had already appeared in Lufeng Forest. In the blink of an eye, they appeared in a completely new and strange place. Although Lin Yi had experienced this kind of feeling once before, when he came from the secular world to the Heaven Stage Island, he also used the teleportation formation. However, perhaps because of the change in his strength, Lin Yi now felt much stronger. R1152. Chapter 42-43. Previously, Lin Yi was just an expert in the early stage of Foundation establishment. When he was teleporting, he was just watching for fun. However, he was now an expert in the early stage of Gold Core. During the teleportation process, he had already begun to consciously explore the mysteries contained in it. However, due to the limitation of his strength, what he could feel was still very limited. Lin Yi turned his head and looked at Huang Xiaodao. Seeing that there was nothing strange about her, he then felt relieved and looked around at the current environment. At this moment, the 6 of them were in an extremely dense forest. Whether it was under their feet, around them, or above their heads, there were all kinds of plants with extremely strong vitality. Some of them had been seen elsewhere, but some of them had never been seen or heard of before. Sure enough, there was no miasma. This was the first thing that Lin Yi confirmed. Being in a dense forest, although the light was weak, at least he could see the surroundings clearly. Even if there was a distance of tens of meters, as long as there were no plants in the way, he could still see clearly. If there was a miasma, this would not be the case. At this moment, Huang Xiaodao gently pulled Lin Yi and pointed to the sky. Looking up, Lenny could not help but feel a chill in his heart. About less than 30 meters above, there was an extremely thick fog that covered the sky and the sun. However, it was still noon, and there were still a few weak rays of sunlight that could pass through the fog. Otherwise, it would probably be dark. Brother Gua, is the layer above the fog miasma? Lenny could not help but ask curiously. It seemed to be not much different from the sea fog that he was used to, but the color was a little darker. Not bad. Gua Dingtao nodded. It was the third year in a row that he had come to Lufing Forest, and he could be considered to have a better understanding of the environment here. It's noon now. Theoretically, it should be the time when the light is the most abundant, but there is only such a weak light. If it is a normal time for the miasma, there will not even be such a little light. How can there be such dense plants under the ground? Lenny could not help but feel even more puzzled. I have not thought about this. Gua Dingtao was suddenly stumped and scratched his head a little awkwardly. He was not the kind of person who would think carefully on his own. He had not heard this kind of thing from others, so of course he did not know. Lufing Forest isn't like this normally. At this time, Chu Booby, who was at the front, suddenly said, "The so-called disappearance of the miasma is just a misleading rumor. During this period of time, the miasma has only risen to mid-air due to the influence of the local special airflow. Normally, the miasma would not be so high and might even be thinner. It's just that it's close to the ground, so the light wouldn't be as bad as it is now. So that's how it is. I've learned a lot." Hearing this, Lenny couldn't help but look at Chu Booby in a higher light. Although this person's elegance and gentleness hid a hint of ruthlessness, which made Lin very wary, but putting this aside, the feeling that Chu Booby gave off was indeed not simple. Brother Chu is really knowledgeable, unlike some people who are not only weak, but also ignorant. Feng Hongyu hugged Chu Booby's arm and raised her head to look at Lin proudly. Previously, when Lin pretended to be calm and suddenly took out the Spirit Jade card, she was very displeased. Lin did not pay attention to this woman. After looking at Chu Booby, he suddenly asked, "Brother Chu, forgive me for asking, but do you usually come to Lufing Forest?" Even Gua Dingtao and the others were stunned by his words. They could not help but look at Chu Booby in surprise. It was normal for him to come to Lufing Forest at a time like this, but if he dared to come at any other time, then he would truly be a daring person with great skill. The current Lufing Forest was like a completely different world compared to the Lufing Forest before. Even though it was still filled with danger, as long as one was careful and their luck wasn't too bad, even if they were unable to obtain any treasures, they would still be able to escape unscathed. However, if it was normal, the miasma of Lufing Forest was like a dragon's pool and a tiger's den for human cultivators. Out of 10 people who came here, 9.5 would die here. If Chu Booby had really been here at some other time and was still safe and sound until now, then this person could really be regarded as a big fat thigh. Yes, I was trapped here once and accidentally stayed here for a while. Fortunately, I managed to survive in the end. Chu Booby looked at Lin, waved the white paper fan in his hand, and replied lightly. Everyone looked at each other, and their gazes toward Chu Booby suddenly became a bit more respectful. His words were neither salty nor light, but the danger involved could be guessed without the details. This person was really not simple. Lin, he was even more certain of his judgment. He gave Huang Xiaotao a look, indicating for her to carefully follow him to avoid any accidents. At this moment, everyone's expression suddenly changed. In the distant forest, there was a roar accompanied by the rustling of the grass. It was obvious that a spirit beast was quickly approaching. Before anyone could react, the owner of the voice had appeared behind them from 1,000 feet away a moment ago. An incomparably swift and huge black shadow suddenly rushed out. Lin, he didn't have time to look carefully. He quickly grabbed Huang Xiaodao and quickly dodged to the side. At the same time, Chu Booby reacted the same way and dodged to the side with Feng Hongyu. However, Gua Dingtao and Wang Feng were in a rather sorry state. Gua Dingtao was slightly better off and managed to escape by rolling and crawling. Wang Feng, on the other hand, was not so lucky. He couldn't dodge in time and was directly knocked to the side by the huge black shadow. Fortunately, it only brushed against him and didn't hit him directly. Otherwise, even if Wang Feng didn't die, he would be half-crippled. In a place like this, being heavily injured and half-crippled was no different from being dead. Unless it was a true friendship, no one would be willing to take a risk with a burden. At the very least, among everyone present, Lin Yi couldn't see anyone who had a particularly close relationship with Wang Feng. The huge black shadow passed through everyone and didn't stop after injuring Wang Feng. It left behind a series of afterimages and instantly disappeared into the forest. Purple lightning, wind beast. Lin Yi was startled. Although the black shadow was very fast, he was still able to recognize it at a glance because it was too familiar. Lin Yi never thought that he would be able to see Little Feng's kind on Heavenly Island, especially in Lufeng's forest. Heavenly Island was basically isolated from a secular world. Lin Yi thought that purple lightning wind beasts only existed in the secular world. He didn't expect Heavenly Island to have one as well. Furthermore, from the looks of it, the purple lightning wind beast strength was much higher than Little Feng's. R1152. Chapter 42-44. Even though its speed was too fast to be seen clearly, judging from the fact that it could injure Wang Feng, it was at least a golden core stage spirit beast. After all, Wang Feng was an expert in the middle stage of the golden core stage. If he was only in the foundation establishment stage, he would not have been hit so easily and would not have been injured. The purple lightning beast of wind and thunder was a spirit beast that excelled in speed, and with a higher level of strength, its speed was even more frightening. Even Lin Yi himself wouldn't be able to catch up to the beast that had just charged past him. This was an innate talent of its race, and no matter how hard humans trained, they wouldn't be able to catch up to it. We can't stay here for long. Let's find a place to talk. Chu Bubi frowned. Without waiting for the others to respond, he took Feng Hongyu and walked forward. Gui Dengtao and Wang Feng did not dare to delay and hurriedly followed. Although Wang Feng was injured, he could still move normally and would not be left behind. Lin Yi nodded slightly to Huang Xiaodao and signaled her to follow Chu Bubi. The reason why the purple lightning beast suddenly rushed out was most likely because of the sudden appearance of the six people's aura, which alerted the beast. However, apart from that, there was another more dangerous possibility. It was possible that the purple electric wind thunder beast was not the only one alarmed, but another more powerful spirit beast. The purple electric wind thunder beast was merely an innocent bystander. Otherwise, if it was on its own, it would have chased after the crowd instead of charging toward the crowd. The only reason it was able to run so fast earlier was because the stronger spirit beast was chasing after it. Although everyone was in the golden core stage, and Chu Bubi was in the late golden core stage, Lufeng Forest was the home ground of spirit beasts. It was just that this purple lightning beast in the golden core stage came and went without a trace. It was already enough to make them suffer. If there was another more powerful spirit beast, the six of them might die here. They had just arrived at Lufeng Forest. They hadn't even done anything yet. They hadn't even seen what the heaven and earth treasure looked like. If they were to be smacked in the head, they would really die before they could achieve anything. It would make them want to cry, but have no tears. The crowd followed Chu Bubi. After a while, finally, they found a tree hole that was relatively hidden and safe. Chu Bubi led them into the tree hole. Come, let's take a look at the map and confirm our location. Chu Bubi signaled for everyone to sit in a circle. He took out the map of Lufeng Forest and asked everyone to identify the location together. Everyone nodded with lingering fear in their hearts. Then, they looked at the map as well. After arriving at a place like Lufeng Forest, confirming one's location was the most important thing to do. Otherwise, if they didn't even know where they were, let alone searching for treasures, they wouldn't even be able to return. If he wanted to go back, he had to find a teleportation array. This was marked on the map, but if he couldn't even determine his own position, how could he find it? All of them were golden core experts. His perception and discernment abilities far exceeded that of an ordinary person. However, it was in Lufeng Forest, and he had just arrived. He hadn't even had the time to regulate his breathing, and there weren't any landmarks in the surroundings. How could it be easy for him to confirm his current location? We are now. It's here. Chu Booby quickly pointed out the location after identifying it for a moment. This caused Lin, Yi, and the others to be astonished. They looked at each other. Feng Hongyu and Chu Booby were on the same side. There was no strange expression on their faces, but Guo Dengtao, Lin Yi, and the others looked a little unsure. After all, identifying the location was not something that could be solved with strength. Even if Chu Booby was a Golden Core late-stage expert, he shouldn't be so sure. There's no need to doubt it. I've been here before, so I have a slight impression of it. Chu Booby waved his hand indifferently and dispelled everyone's doubts. He then said, I believe everyone has come to Lufeng Forest for the heavenly resources, right? Of course. Guo Dengtao and Wang Feng nodded. That's right. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao also echoed. At the Golden Core stage, in order to improve their strength, in addition to relying on their own diligent cultivation, the so-called elixirs on the market, except for a few kinds that could be counted on one's fingers, had little effect on them. Even if there was, it was priceless. If there was no opportunity, they might not be able to buy it, even if they had a lot of spiritual jades. In contrast, if they really wanted to improve their strength quickly, it was better to pin their hopes on various treasures. If they were lucky enough to get a myriad crossing golden dan fruit, it would be worth dozens of years of hard work. That's good. Since we're already here, I won't hide it from everyone. Chu Booby's eyes swept across everyone's faces, and he said slowly with a dignified expression, I don't know if you've heard of infant ginseng. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Lin Yi's heart moved. Not only did he know about infant ginseng, but he had also used it to refine elixirs. When he was in Middle Island, the most important main material to refine the gathering nascent golden dan for the will of heaven was the infant ginseng. At that time, the infant ginseng that the will of heaven gave him was not a complete stalk, but only a small piece the size of a thumb. Even so, he successfully used it to refine the gathering nascent golden dan. According to the will of heaven, the infant ginseng was very rare. It was even rarer than the myriad crossing golden dan fruit. Even that small piece of infant ginseng was something that he had spent a lot of effort to collect when he was at his peak. As for a complete stalk of infant ginseng, not to mention the will of heaven, it had never appeared on the market before. Just a small piece was already a priceless item. If it was a whole stalk of infant ginseng that grew naturally, how much would it be worth? Thinking of this, even someone as calm as Lin, he couldn't help but breathe heavily. When he looked at Chu Booby again, he couldn't help but feel shocked. Could it be that this guy actually had news about the infant ginseng? Brother Chu, did you come for the infant ginseng this time? Guo Dengtao's breathing also became heavy. He had seen a lot of the world, so he had heard of the infant ginseng and knew that it was much more precious than the myriad crossing golden dan fruit. Now that he suddenly heard Chu Booby mention it, he was immediately overwhelmed with emotions. He had some friendship with Chu Booby, but it wasn't too deep. The reason why he came forward to form a team this time was actually because Chu Booby took the initiative to find him with Feng Hongyu and said that they wanted to take a trip to Lufeng Forest. That was why he called Wang Feng and then called Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. Chapter 42-45. However, at that time, he naturally thought that Chu Booby's plan was similar to his, which was to come to Lufeng Forest to find some heavenly treasures, increase his strength, and then participate in the Eastern Continent's Huang Stage Academy's test. He didn't expect that Chu Booby's appetite would be so big. He actually wanted the nascent ginseng. Wang Feng, who was standing at the side, was extremely shocked as well. He must have realized what the two words infant ginseng represented. That's right, I'm now in the late gold core stage, and I'm not far from the great perfection stage. I have to start preparing to condense my nascent soul in advance. If I want to condense my nascent soul quickly, I need to refine the nascent soul golden pill, and the nascent ginseng is the main ingredient for refining the nascent soul golden pill. Chu Booby didn't conceal his smile as he spoke to the crowd. But even though Gui Dingtao's breathing was heavy, he was still cautious by nature, and he didn't get carried away by the words nascent ginseng. He said with slight hesitation, "Let's not talk about whether a top-rate treasure of the heavens and the earth like the nascent ginseng really exists in Lufeng Forest. Even if it does exist, it would surely be in the deepest depths of the forest, and it's absolutely impossible for it to exist in the periphery of the forest." That's right. The infant ginseng naturally won't appear in the periphery of the forest. Therefore, I've already made up my mind to go to the depths of the core this time. Do you dare to come with me? Don't worry, as long as we go together, regardless of whether we can find the nascent ginseng or not, regardless of the final harvest, all the heavenly materials and earthly treasures will be divided equally according to the number of people. Chu Bubi's face was full of sincerity as he solemnly vowed. The infant ginseng is indeed something that people yearn for even in their dreams. Gui Dingtao and Wang Feng looked at each other and said hesitantly, "Everyone wants the infant ginseng, but I've heard that before, even if it's a team, the infant ginseng won't be able to obtain it. Even experts at the peak of the gold core stage have never been able to come out safely. This is a place of certain death. With our meager strength, we won't be able to make it out. That's right, the infant ginseng is good, but you need to be alive to get it." Wang Feng chimed in from the side. "With our meager strength, we will only die a quicker and more miserable death if we go deep into the mountains." This was not an alarmist statement. The spirit beasts in the periphery were weak, while the spirit beasts in the depths were strong. At the moment, they were only in the periphery. He had already encountered a golden core stage purple electric tempest beast. If he were to go deeper, who knew what he would encounter? This was the South Island, the base camp of the spirit beasts. Even though Lufeng Forest was located at the edge, any spirit beast at the perfected gold core realm, or even at the nascent soul realm, was definitely not something that the people present could deal with. That's right. Moreover, there's another point. Even if we are lucky enough to find the nascent ginseng and escape unscathed from here, we have no way to refine it into a golden nascent pill. That would be useless. We can't just take it out and sell it, right? Gui Dingtao said worriedly. "The condensed soul pill is a level 6 elixir, and I think only an elixir god like Zhang Liju would be able to make it. With our connections, where are we going to find such a top-notch alchemist to help us?" Chu Bubi couldn't help but frown. He originally thought that with the fatal attraction of the infant ginseng, as long as he mentioned it, everyone would definitely become hot-headed. Gui Dingtao and Wang Feng didn't look like much, but they were able to maintain their rationality. After listing out so many reasons, it was obvious that he did not want to go. As for Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao, neither of them said anything and just listened on the side, watching coldly. Refining elixirs is actually easy to solve. Feng Hongyu, who was sitting beside Chu Bubi, suddenly spoke up. "I heard that a Tiandan pavilion opened up in the Middle Island not long ago, specializing in making and selling all sorts of elixirs. Occasionally, they would sell level 5 and level 6 elixirs. We should be able to find them. I have a relative who lives not far from the Tiandan pavilion." He was speechless. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he forced himself to maintain his composure. "The owner of the Tiandan pavilion is sitting right in front of you, and you've been looking down on them before, and now you're thinking of asking Tiandan Pavilion to help you?" However, Feng Hongyu's words made Gui Dingtao and Wang Feng's eyes brighten, and their hesitant expressions changed to one of excitement. In fact, even Lin himself was a little moved. After all, who didn't want to advance to the nascent soul stage? On the Heavenly Island, Foundation Establishment stage experts were just the beginning, or as core stage experts were the masters. Only when they reached the nascent soul stage could they be considered as the #1 figure. Even on the Middle Island, they would be one of the top experts. Everyone's worries are not without reason, but in my opinion, the depths of the mountains are not as terrifying as you think. It's not that you will not be able to return after entering the depths of the mountains. To tell you the truth, when I accidentally stayed in the Lufeng Forest, the place I was at was actually in the depths of the mountains. Chu Bubi struck while the iron was hot and threw out a heavy bomb. "What? Brother Chu, You've been to the deep mountains? Gui Dangtao and the others were shocked. Previously, when Linny asked, Chu Bubi only said that he accidentally stayed in Lufeng Forest for a while, but he didn't say that it was in the deep mountains. The degree of danger was not the same as before. That's right. The last time I came here with others, there was an accident. Not only did I miss the time when the fog dissipated, but I was also forced to stay in the deep mountains for a while. However, in the end, I was able to escape unscathed. Although the deep mountains are dangerous, they are not as scary as outsiders say. As long as you know the route, it is actually very safe. Chu Bubi comforted everyone. Is that true? Gui Dangtao and Wang Feng were indeed tempted. If Chu Bubi really had a way to bring them out alive, then even if it was a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, they would still go. After all, this was a nascent ginseng that even nascent soul stage cultivators would go crazy for. Of course, I have to tell you the ugly truth first. Compared to the outer region where we are right now, the degree of danger in the deep mountains is definitely higher. After all, risk and reward are always proportional. No matter how good the route is, it is impossible to not have any danger. It is not realistic at all. Chu Bubi turned around and said, if he blindly lured everyone into the deep mountains, everyone would be suspicious. But now that he had said it, everyone felt that he was honest and reliable, so it was easier for them to listen to his commands. Sure enough, after hearing what he said, Gui Dangtao and Wang Feng's wariness decreased a lot. They were already eager to try. If what Chu Bubi said was true, then this was a rare opportunity. If they followed Chu Bubi, they would be able to get some soup to drink. Otherwise, if they were to rely on themselves, they would never be able to see a treasure like the nascent ginseng, let alone have a share. Chapter 42-46. Lin Yi, on the other hand, remained silent and watched coldly. Although he also had thoughts about the infant ginseng, it was not to the point of being obsessed. He could faintly feel that Chu Bubi had other plans. Huang Xiaodao looked at Lin Yi. No matter how much she wanted it, she would only follow Lin Yi. Wherever Lin Yi went, she would go. If that's the case, we can go, but Gui Dangtao and Wang Feng looked at each other and nodded at the same time. However, they still had a trace of vigilance. They looked at Chu Bubi and asked, since there's such a good thing, why don't you go by yourself? Gui Dangtao and Wang Feng could be considered as hardcore, but he did not have such a good relationship with Chu Bubi. This was related to the nascent ginseng, a top-grade treasure of heaven and earth. For cultivators who valued strength above all else, they could not even recognize their own brothers and masters, let alone a shallow relationship. Moreover, they needed to gather 6 people to come to the Lufeng Forest, but there was no need for them to go back. If they were Chu Bubi, they would have definitely gone their separate ways and secretly gone there. How could they let so many people know about such an important piece of information and even encourage them to go together? For something like the infant ginseng, if it could be monopolized, it would be monopolized. Who would complain about having more? Would Chu Bubi be so kind as to share with everyone? Although they were tempted, Gui Dangtao and Wang Feng were masters at the middle stage of the Gold Core realm. They were not fools. They would not completely trust Chu Bubi. It was dangerous to go deep into the forest, and it was related to their lives. They were still very cautious. I can tell you frankly that the infant ginseng is very difficult to find. Even if I know the approximate location, it is impossible for me to know the specific location. After all, the location is only marked on the map. I have not been there personally, so it is difficult to find it in a short time. Chu Bubi paused and looked at everyone. There are many people going, so it is naturally easier to find it. The time spent searching for it will be less. After all, it is deep in the forest, and the more time we spend, the more dangerous it is. I dare not stay for long. Gui Dangtao and Wang Feng nodded slightly. Chu Bubi's reason was correct. It was very pertinent and understandable. However, because of this, the two of them looked at Chu Bubi even more highly. If they were in Chu Bubi's position, even if they knew it was dangerous, they wouldn't be able to do it. Even so, he would never share such an important piece of information with everyone. This required a lot of courage. Everyone should know that a nascent ginseng doesn't need a complete stalk. Even a small piece of it can be used to refine a golden nascent pill. Therefore, as long as we can find a stalk of nascent ginseng and divide it among the 6 of us, each portion will be enough to refine a golden nascent pill. Do you understand what I mean now? Chu Bubi looked at everyone with a burning gaze. All right, we believe you, Brother Chu. Guo Dengtao and Wang Feng nodded their heads in unison. Very good. Chu Bubi was overjoyed, and then he looked at Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao, who were silent, and asked, "What about you two? Are you coming with us, or are you going to part ways here?" As he spoke, the atmosphere in the tree hole instantly dropped to a freezing point. Chu Bubi's eyes flickered with killing intent. It was obvious that if Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao rejected him directly, he would definitely kill them to silence them. Things would really develop to that point. Lin Yi believed that Guo Dengtao and Wang Feng would not stop Chu Bubi, and they might even join him. Although Guo Dengtao was a person who was easy to talk to, when it came to a treasure like the nascent ginseng, even brothers could turn against each other in the face of profit. Moreover, it was only a temporary team. If Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao did not join them, they had to be prepared for the news to be leaked. Once the news was leaked, even if no one came to snatch the nascent ginseng from them in the Lufeng Forest, once they got out, others would eventually know that they might have a nascent ginseng on them. An innocent man's wealth would become his own ruin, and the trouble that would follow would be obvious. As a result, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao only had 2 choices. They could either be on the same side as them, or they could share the same glory and benefit together. That was the only way they could ensure that the news wouldn't leak out. As for the other choice, it was to silence them. The Jianghu was dangerous, and no matter how much Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao swore, everyone would only believe one thing, and that was that only dead people would not leak the news. For this reason, even someone like Guo Dengtao would definitely kill them. In an instant, they became the target of public criticism, being stared at by everyone, and even Chu Bubi had deliberately blocked the only entrance. If they did not comply, they would immediately be caught. A storm was brewing, and Huang Xiaodao could not help but feel nervous. Her palms were a little sweaty, and she turned to look at Lin Yi's attitude. Lin Yi still looked indifferent. Instead, he looked at everyone calmly. Chu Bubi had roped in Guo Dengtao and Wang Feng, and at the same time, there was also Feng Hongyu. It seemed that he had the absolute upper hand, but in Lin Yi's eyes, they were not even a threat. If he and Huang Xiaodao joined forces, Chu Bubi, a master at the late stage of the Gold Core realm, was just an ant that could be destroyed at any time. Even if everyone besieged him, there was nothing to be afraid of. The 2 of them could directly kill 2 people, including Chu Bubi, with 1 move. With another move, they could kill all of them. There was no need to feign civility. Of course, we also want to join. Lin Yi smiled slightly and nodded happily. He was really interested in this nascent ginseng. Anyway, he had come to this Lufeng Forest, so there was no harm in following Chu Bubi. No matter what tricks Chu Bubi would play later, anyway, the absolute strength of Huang Xiaodao and himself was there. It would not be too late to take action at that time. For now, it was better to continue to pretend to be weak to eat the tiger. Good, straightforward. Chu Bubi was obviously stunned for a moment, and then he could not help but say happily. Speaking of which, although Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao's strength was the lowest among everyone, but for some reason, Chu Bubi was the most wary of Lin Yi. Whether it was the calm temperament that Lin Yi showed, or the unexpected scene of him taking out the Spirit Jade card, it made him subconsciously feel that this person was not so simple and could not be easily fooled. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi agreed so straightforwardly. This was really beyond Chu Bubi's expectations, but this was also good. It saved him trouble. Unless he had no other choice, he did not want to rashly kill his teammates. After all, even if Guo Dengtao and Wang Feng did not say it, it would definitely leave a knot in their hearts. In the future, it might become an unexpected variable. Chapter 42-47. Since everyone has decided to participate, I will tell everyone about the specific route we will take to enter the depths of the mountain, as well as the things to take note of. Chu Booby clapped his hands excitedly, then turned to look at Lin E and said, "Give me your backpack." "Okay." Lin E glanced at him and nodded. He turned his hand and handed the backpack over to Chu Booby. Chu Booby had personally handed it to him in the morning, but he didn't know what was inside. Chu Booby rummaged through the backpack for a moment, then took out 6 maps and distributed them to Lin E and the others. Didn't they already have maps? Lin E couldn't help feeling a little surprised, but when he took a closer look, he immediately understood that the two were different. Although they were both maps of Lufing Forest, the one given by Chu Booby was much larger and more detailed than the one given by the teleportation array. Although the map sent by the transmission formation also had a location marked, it was not detailed, and there were very few landmarks and reference objects marked on it. But the map given by Chu Booby, from the top of the mountain to the small gullies and streams, everything was clearly marked. Even if it was the first time someone came to the Lufing Forest, they would still be able to see it with a glance. Linny couldn't help but look at Chu Booby in surprise. Who exactly was this guy? An ordinary map was easy to find, but a detailed map like this was simply impossible for ordinary people. For cultivators who were interested in exploring Lufing Forest, this map was already an incredible treasure. If the news spread, people would probably buy it even if it cost tens of thousands of spirit jades. It should be known that in a place like Lufing Forest where danger lurked everywhere, a detailed map was a life-saving measure for cultivators. However, after comparing it with the map given by the teleportation array, Lin E found that the map given by Chu Booby wasn't the entire Lufing Forest, but only a part of it. Speaking of which, this particularly detailed map actually revolved around a route, and the destination of this route was marked on it. It was a small circle deep in the mountains. Everyone looked carefully. The small circle on the map is the possible location of the nascent ginseng, which is also the destination of our trip. As long as we follow the route marked on the map, we can safely reach there. Chu Booby solemnly vowed to everyone. Hearing this, everyone's eyes lit up. All of them were so excited that they were itching to give it a try. It was as if they could already see the baby ginseng waving at them and couldn't wait to set off immediately. "Brother Chu, forgive me for asking, but is this map reliable?" Lin E suddenly asked. When Guadangtao and the others heard this, they couldn't help feeling startled. They all turned to look at Chu Booby. They had been too excited just now, and only after hearing Lin Yi's words did they remember that there was still such a hidden danger. The map was detailed. However, if it wasn't reliable, then it wouldn't be a life-saving measure. Instead, it would become a fatal trap. He led everyone to report to the King of Hell. "That's a good question. I can tell you very clearly that there is no need to worry. This map is absolutely reliable." Chu Booby didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, "To be honest, this map was passed down by my Chu family's ancestors. One of my ancestors and his friends took this route when they came to the core of Lufing Forest. That's why there is this map." "Family map?" Guadangtao and Wang Feng were stunned. They didn't know much about Chu Booby, so they didn't expect this map to be his family map. No wonder it had never appeared on the market. "So, Brother Chu's ancestors should have found the nascent ginseng?" Lin E immediately asked. Since this map was passed down by his ancestors, it meant that the ancestor of the Chu family must have seen the nascent ginseng. After that, the people of the Chu family should have tried many times in this area. After all, the temptation of the nascent ginseng was so great that ordinary people couldn't resist it. You can say that, according to the ancestor of the Chu family, he and his friends accidentally found the breeding place of the nascent ginseng, so he deliberately left this family map for the descendants of the Chu family to refer to. It's a pity that after him, no one in the Chu family could reach the late stage of the Gold Core realm. Without this strength, this family map is useless. It wasn't until I broke through that it could be used again, Chu Booby explained. Everyone nodded. Lufing Forest was very dangerous. If one didn't even have the strength of the late stage of the Gold Core realm, they wouldn't dare to go deep into the core. Even if they were lucky enough to get the nascent ginseng, they wouldn't be able to use it for a while. After all, the gathering nascent golden elixir was a 6th grade elixir. It was only effective for those in the peak of the gold core realm who were about to condense their nascent soul. If they directly took it without the strength, not only would they not be able to break through, but their bodies would also explode. A good elixir would become a deadly poison. However, Lin Yi didn't completely believe Chu Bubi's words. It seemed that there was nothing wrong with the logic, but if he thought about it carefully, he could still find a lot of strange things. Did the ancestor of the Chu family get the nascent ginseng? If he got it, then it was very likely that he would become a master of the original infant realm. He would have a long life and wouldn't die so easily. Why didn't he come back himself? Also, even if the ancestor of the Chu family didn't get the nascent ginseng or died in an accident, would the descendants of the Chu family really be so obedient? If they weren't strong enough, would they really just guard the treasure mountain and not step into Lufeng Forest? According to the thinking of a normal person, even if they weren't strong enough, they would definitely find a reliable person to help them since they were guarding such a family map. They wouldn't do nothing at all, right? Even if the martial world was dangerous and outsiders couldn't be trusted, there should be a way. They shouldn't be so helpless, right? Thinking about it carefully, these were all questions. However, Lin Yi didn't directly question them. He didn't believe Chu Bubi's lies, but he believed that the map was most likely real. Instead of turning hostile now, it was better to see what would happen next. Brother Chu, you said that you accidentally stayed in Lufeng Forest last time, and it was deep in the core area. You must have been exploring the way, right? Lin Yi suddenly asked. You guessed it. Chu Bubi was startled, but then he smiled and explained to everyone, I wanted to try last time, but because it was my first time, I didn't have any experience and didn't calculate the time well. So before I reached the core area, the miasma returned. I had no choice but to find a way to escape. However, it wasn't like I didn't gain anything. At least I personally verified the reliability of the map, so everyone doesn't have to worry. I see. Since Brother Chu has personally verified it, we can rest assured. Gui Dengtao and the others nodded. Chapter 42-48. Then, is there anything else you don't understand? If you have any questions, you can ask me now. Otherwise, once we get out of this tree hole, it won't be good for you to speak loudly, Chu Bubi said to everyone. Speaking loudly in the dense forest was an absolute taboo. It would be a disaster if the nearby ferocious spirit beasts were alarmed. No more. Gui Dengtao and Wang Feng looked at each other and shook their heads. The route was clearly marked on the map, and Lin Yi's questions allowed them to understand the reliability and origin of the map. There was nothing else to ask. What about you? Chu Bubi deliberately looked at Lin Yi and raised his head. I have no problem either. Brother Chu has already explained it very clearly. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Of course, he wasn't like Gui Dengtao, who was completely at ease with Chu Bubi. The reason why he had asked so many questions just now, aside from testing the reliability of this so-called family map, was actually to numb Chu Bubi. After all, according to a normal person's mindset, a person like Lin Yi would not be easily fooled. If he did not ask anything, then they would have to be careful. However, since he was so cautious and asked so many questions, he must have let down his guard. Therefore, they could relax a little. If it was only a 30% guess before, then now Lin Yi was at least 50% sure that this Chu Bubi must have some tricks up his sleeves, but he couldn't tell what he was planning. Well, time is limited. Everyone, pack up and adjust yourselves. We'll set off immediately. Chu Bubi nodded and motioned for everyone to prepare a little. Then, he immediately took the lead and walked out of the tree hole. Feng Hongyu, Gui Dengtao, and Wang Feng followed closely behind with faces full of excitement. Lin Yi, who was the last to leave, gave Huang Xiaotao a look to tell her to follow him closely before following them out of the tree hole. Feeling the cold air outside, the excitement aroused by the nascent ginseng dissipated a little, and their minds became much clearer. All of them raised their vigilance and guarded against everything around them. Previously, when they were in the tree hole, everyone felt somewhat safe, but now that they were exposed in the forest, even if they were all gold core experts, they couldn't help but be on tenterhooks, fearing that they would suddenly encounter some powerful and ferocious spirit beast. Chu Bubi took the lead, but he did not directly lead everyone forward. Instead, he took out a compass from Lin Yi's backpack and carefully compared it with his surroundings. Although he had already roughly confirmed the location, he was going to bring everyone deep into the mountains this time. Any mistake could cause everyone to lose their lives in vain, so it was necessary to confirm it again. In the deep mountains and dense forests, the most terrifying thing was to lose one's way, followed by spirit beasts. As Golden Core stage experts, they still had a chance of survival when facing a powerful spirit beast. However, if they lost their bearings, there would only be one outcome: complete annihilation. Lin Yi secretly paid attention to Chu Bubi's every move and discovered that this person was not simple at all. Putting aside the doubts in his heart, from the beginning until now, this person's performance in all aspects could be considered impeccable. It was simply perfect. Take the current situation as an example. Even if an ordinary person held his very detailed family map, even if he used it with a compass, under this thick miasma, where it was difficult to see the sun, it was difficult to determine the location in a short time. Before Lin Yi made his debut in the secular world, he had received professional training in this area. However, even for him, it was difficult to completely correspond the real location with the map in a short time. However, Chu Bubi was very familiar with this. In addition to his familiarity with the map, there was another more important reason, and that was the identification method used by Chu Bubi, which was very novel in Lin Yi's view. Of course, it could also be said to be very professional. Not only did he need to rely on the compass, but Chu Bubi also carefully checked the species of the surrounding vegetation and even deliberately looked for some low-level medicinal herbs. After identifying them one by one, he would match them with the family map in his hands. On this family map, there were indeed detailed notes on the species of vegetation and medicinal herbs in a certain area. This was even comparable to a professional scientific map. If Guodangtao and the others did not work hard in this aspect, even if they had this super detailed map, they would not be able to make much use of it. From this, it could be seen that Chu Bubi had really made careful preparations for this. While Lin Yi was secretly surprised, he also looked forward to the nascent ginseng. No matter what tricks Chu Bubi was playing, since he had made so many preparations, it was impossible that he was just fooling around. It seemed that the clue of the nascent ginseng was 80% real. Everyone be careful, be vigilant, and follow me closely. Don't fall behind. After Chu Bubi confirmed the location and direction, he lowered his voice and said to everyone, then immediately took the lead to move forward. Everyone did not dare to be the slightest bit negligent, and hurriedly followed behind. If they were to fall behind in this kind of place, they would really not be able to find a place to cry. Along the way, everyone followed the map. Every once in a while, they would stop to reconfirm their position so that they wouldn't get lost. Other than Chu Bubi leading the way, everyone else took turns to be on guard, not daring to lower their guard in the slightest. In order to prevent mental exhaustion from the continuous journey, even if everyone was a Gold Core stage master, they would consciously stop to meditate and rest every 3 hours. When the sky was completely dark, everyone would find a tree hole or a rock cave to rest for the night, and then set off after dawn. For a few days, apart from resting, everyone was hurrying on their journey. Although they occasionally encountered spirit beasts, because they were vigilant in time, every time it was daunting but not dangerous. Under the leadership of Chu Bubi, everyone advanced all the way to the core of Lufeng Forest. Before this, everyone still had a little doubt about Chu Bubi, but now, after a few days of personal experience, Guodangtao and Wang Feng were already convinced by Chu Bubi. Right now, they were already in the core of Lufeng Forest. If it was them, not to mention walking all the way here, they would not even be able to reach halfway. They would have long been lost in the vast, dense forest, or simply become the rations of spirit beasts. Chapter 42-49. Even so, with the gradual changes in the surrounding environment, everyone's breathing unconsciously became much heavier. Looking closely at their surroundings, they could clearly feel that it had become much darker and gloomier than before. It could even be said that the further they went, the more silent and eerie the environment became. Along the way, they would at least occasionally encounter spirit beasts. Although this wasn't a good thing for the group, who only wanted to hurry on with their journey, they at least felt a little livelier. Yet now, this ghastly feeling caused them to feel as if they'd unknowingly walked into the nine hells, and it was even to the extent that the surrounding flowers and plants weren't so verdant and luxuriant anymore. Instead, they'd become a mess, withered, yellow, and gloomy. Even if there was an occasional bit of green, it always gave others a horrifying and miserable feeling, and it caused them to unconsciously feel a chill run down their spines. Everyone's expression instantly changed. They could understand that the deeper regions were different from the outer regions, but the problem was that even the flora and fauna couldn't be so different from the outer regions, right? Although they were all powerful and dignified Golden Core experts at this moment, they couldn't help but feel a little lacking in confidence. Just like ordinary people, they were filled with fear towards the unknown. In fact, because they knew more, most of the time, their courage might not even be comparable to that of ignorant and fearless ordinary people. Are we going the wrong way? This place is too eerie and scary. Huang Xiaodao couldn't help but pull Lin a little fearfully and asked softly with a nervous look on her face. Although Huang Xiaodao looked obedient and quiet, she was actually a classic example of a person who was soft on the outside but hard on the inside. Moreover, after so many years of going out for training missions, her courage was far greater than that of ordinary girls. Even if she was alone in the deep mountains and forests, she might not be afraid. However, the scene in front of her was too horrifying. The surroundings were so quiet that everyone could even hear each other's breathing clearly. Although Huang Xiaodao was only speaking softly to Lin Yi, everyone in front could still hear her. In reality, it wasn't just Huang Xiaodao. Even pure men like Wu Dengtao and Wang Feng were a little fearful at this moment. After hearing this, they unconsciously shrunk their necks. This place was really too strange and completely different from what everyone had expected. If it was said that there were dragons and tigers crouching here and powerful spirit beasts everywhere, everyone would be able to accept it more. At least he was mentally prepared. However, the scene in front of him was lifeless. There wasn't even a single living thing to be seen. In addition, the light was so dim. As the saying goes, there must be something wrong when something is abnormal. This definitely wasn't right. Lin Yi held onto Huang Xiaodao, and he was similarly surprised and bewildered in his heart. He'd noticed this abnormality a long time ago, and he'd always been on high alert. He was on guard against every blade of grass and tree in his surroundings. But surprisingly, other than the eerie and terrifying environment, there was nothing wrong with this place. Lin Yi was puzzled. However, he wasn't too worried. His jade pendant had a warning function. As long as there was danger that he didn't notice, the jade pendant would automatically warn him. Until now, the jade pendant had not shown any abnormalities, and he did not sense any danger. Therefore, there was only one explanation. The eerie and strange scene in front of him wasn't a sign of danger or abnormality. It should have been like this all along, but he couldn't figure out the reason for it at the moment. It seems that your knowledge is really limited. Chu Booby, who was walking at the front, turned around and looked at everyone's expressions. He couldn't help but smile. Could it be that you've only heard of the infant ginseng, but you've never heard of its unique growing environment? That's right. I see. With Chu Booby's reminder, Wu Dengtao suddenly patted his head in realization. The nervousness in his heart also disappeared. The growing environment of the infant ginseng? Lin Yi was slightly stunned. He really hadn't heard of it. After all, he had just reached the core formation stage not long ago. Let alone the nascent soul stage. He didn't even see the shadow of the golden core perfection stage. If he hadn't refined the gathering, nascent golden pill for the will of heaven, he probably wouldn't even know what the infant ginseng was, let alone anything else. Not only Lin Yi, but Huang Xiaodao, Wang Feng, and even Chu Booby's cultivation companion, Feng Hongyu, were also at a loss. Their strength was far from that level, and they hadn't done any special homework in this area. It was normal that they didn't know much about the infant ginseng. Taozi, why don't you explain it to them, so that they won't be so nervous and scare themselves? Chu Booby instructed. At the same time, he continued to walk forward, signaling everyone to hurry up and not fall behind. Okay, it seems that everyone still doesn't know that the infant ginseng is just what we usually call it. It actually has another name, and in a sense, this name is more appropriate. It can also explain our current surrounding environment. Guo Dingtao pretended to be mysterious and kept everyone in suspense. What is its name? Hurry up and say it. Wang Feng pushed him. Perhaps it was because he was injured before, but his body was already a bit uncomfortable. In this gloomy and terrifying environment, he unconsciously felt his hands and feet turn cold, and his heart trembled. Okay, the other name of the infant ginseng is ghost ginseng. Guo Dingtao paused on purpose. Seeing that everyone was looking at him curiously, he continued. As for the reason, it's not because this thing looks like a ghost, but because it usually grows in places with heavy yin energy, such as mass graves. Mass graves? No wonder this place has become so gloomy. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. After knowing the ins and outs of the matter, they were no longer nervous. No matter what, they were Goldcore experts, so they shouldn't be afraid of a mass grave. The reason why they were so nervous was because of the unknown. That's right. According to the markings on the map, there should be a spirit beast burial mound not far from here, so it's normal for this place to be a bit gloomy. Moreover, this also proves that my map is accurate, so everyone doesn't need to worry about anything. Chu Booby said without turning his head. Indeed, this time, following Brother Chu is really not in vain. Guo Dingtao and the others were suddenly happy. When they looked at the surrounding environment, not only were they no longer nervous and afraid, but they also felt more excited. After all, this meant that the infant ginseng of their dreams was getting closer and closer. Chapter 4250. Under Chu Booby's lead, the group quickened their pace and continued to move forward. As expected, not long after, the group discovered some scattered bones on the ground. They could tell that these were the bones of spirit beasts. At first, there were only a few scattered bones, but the further they went, the denser the bones became. Towards the end, there were piles and piles of bones. At this time, the sun had already set in the west. Inadvertently, the group could see some faint, floating phosphorescence among the piles of bones. This was what people often referred to as will-o'-the-wisp. The originally gloomy environment became even more terrifying under the illumination of the ghost flames. Even though everyone already knew the cause and effect, they still couldn't help but look at each other in dismay at this moment. Their scalps felt slightly numb. He compared the map in his hand. Looking at the situation, they had indeed arrived at the spirit beast unmarked burial mounds. It was said that all living things in the world, as long as they had intelligence, could sense the time of their death in advance. The more intelligence they had, the more accurate their senses would be, and the earlier they would die. The reason why spirit beasts were spirit beasts was because they were born with spirit chi, which was much stronger than other species. There were rumors that many spirit beasts could sense the time of their death a few months in advance, so they could make preparations in advance. Although this sounded mysterious, it wasn't purely a rumor. Many people had experienced it before. After all, spirit beasts could be seen everywhere on Heavenly Rank Island. They would often run away from home before they died, and in the end, they would die in the unmarked burial mounds. This kind of thing was not uncommon. In fact, this kind of thing often happened in the secular world. Many household pets would often experience a similar situation before they died. He had heard from Hong Zhong and the others that almost every gathering place of spirit beasts on Heavenly Rank Island, especially those deep in the mountains and forests, had a spirit beast unmarked burial mounds. Almost all the spirit beasts in that area would take the initiative to come to the unmarked burial mounds when they sensed that they were about to die of old age. Then, they would quietly wait there for their death. Although the spirit beast had a strict hierarchy, and under normal circumstances, the spirit beasts in the outer regions with insufficient strength would not be able to enter the depths of the unmarked burial mounds. However, when they were about to die, they would be able to enter without any obstruction. None of the spirit beasts would stop it. This was a common understanding between all the spirit beasts. Lin Yi carefully looked at the map. As long as they passed through the spirit beast unmarked burial mounds, it meant that they were not far from their destination. If everything went smoothly, the nascent ginseng would be right in front of them. At this time, Lin Yi felt that Huang Xiaodao's breathing was a little rapid. She was obviously nervous and afraid. Lin Yi gently held her hand to comfort her. He gestured to her not to be afraid. The surroundings were deathly silent. The people in front could also clearly feel Huang Xiaodao's abnormality. Guo Dengtao even turned around and smiled, giving her a comforting expression. After all, she was a girl. Even the guys found this place creepy, so it was reasonable for her to be a little afraid. Since you're so cowardly, then don't come out and take risks. You won't be of any use at all. There are so many things to do. Feng Hongyu saw this. She turned her head and looked at Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao with a look of ridicule. She took the opportunity to taunt them. Along the way, she had mocked and ridiculed the two of them. It seemed that if she did not do this, she would not be able to display her sense of superiority. She felt uncomfortable holding it in. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao had always treated her as air and could not be bothered to pay attention to her. However, this time, before Feng Hongyu could finish her sentence, she was suddenly interrupted by Huang Xiaodao's sharp scream. Whoosh! Not a sound could be heard. Huang Xiaodao's scream was particularly sharp and immediately startled a black mass of flying beasts in the vicinity. There was no warning at all, and it gave everyone a great shock. Upon closer inspection, these were not powerful spirit beasts. They were just ordinary carrion-eating crows and similar birds. This place was a graveyard for spirit beasts. Unless it was a spirit beast that was about to die, no other spirit beast would come to this place. Are you crazy? Why are you panicking? You're such a coward. So why are you trying to scare us to death? Feng Hongyu's beautiful face turned pale, and she scolded Huang Xiaodao when she regained her senses. She was not the only one. Guo Dengtao, Wang Feng, and the others had ugly expressions on their faces as well. Previously, their surroundings had been deathly silent, and there had been no movement at all. They never thought that there would be so many carrion-eating crows hiding in the dense forest. Under the night sky, the pairs of glowing eyes made them feel like corpses being stared at by the crows, and they could not help but shudder. There's a ghost. Huang Xiaodao cried out in a trembling voice. She then burrowed into Lin Yi's arms and trembled with fear. No matter how strong her heart was, she was still a weak girl. Lin Yi smiled and gently stroked Huang Xiaodao's back tenderly. However, when he looked in the direction of Huang Xiaodao's finger, his expression instantly froze. Perhaps it was because the miasma above their heads had thinned at night, or perhaps it was because this place was too strange and horrifying, but at this moment, everyone could clearly see a blood moon above their heads. The moon was even brighter than it was during the day. However, there was a faint bloody aura, and they could even smell the stench of blood and decay. Under the illumination of the blood-colored moonlight, an extremely strange and evil scene not far in front of them suddenly caused Lin Yi and the others to stop in their tracks. A spirit beast that looked like a rhinoceros from the secular world had its head drooping weakly to one side. Its neck had also been twisted into a shocking and strange angle. Only a thin layer of skin was left connecting its huge body. Its huge head was dragged on the ground, leaving a long, dark red trail of blood. On the side of its body, there was a bloody hole the size of half a person. Its intestines and internal organs flowed all over the ground, and even now, it was still dripping blood. Perhaps it was a psychological effect. But even though they were separated by more than 100 feet, Lin Yi and the others could clearly smell the pungent stench coming from its body. If it was just that, then it would be fine. They could pinch their noses and bear with it for a while. However, The problem was that this thing was already in this state, but it was still not dead. The head that was dragged on the ground was eating something with a ferocious expression. Upon closer inspection, the thing it was chewing on was the intestines and internal organs that had flowed out of its stomach. As it ate, blood bubbled up from the corner of its mouth. Chapter 42:51. Seeing this horrifying scene, not only was Huang Xiaodao frightened, but even Lin Yi felt his scalp go numb. His hair stood on end, and his hair stood on end. 3W. What the hell is this place? How could it be so creepy? Not only Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao, but Guidangtao and Wang Feng also saw this scene. In an instant, they felt as if their scalps were about to explode and their temples were throbbing. The two Golden Elixir Realm cultivators almost fainted from fear. What the hell? Even if they met an original infant stage, super spiritual beast, it would not be as horrifying as this. Is this thing dead or alive? Where did it come from? Coming to a place like this to act like a spoiled child and show off your love. I say, is there something wrong with you? Trash will always be trash. Not only do you have no abilities, you don't even have guts. Taozi, look at what kind of trash you found. Even now, Feng Hongyu hadn't noticed the rhinoceros monster's presence. She continued to taunt Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao without even looking at them. Seeing the direction she was walking in, Guidangtao and the others' expressions became even more strange. They looked at each other and were speechless for a long time. What are you guys standing there for? Hurry up and catch up with Brother Chu. Do you want to fall behind and die here? Feng Hongyu saw that everyone's expressions were strange and did not react. She continued to taunt them as she walked forward. Caw! Suddenly, a crow cawed, startling a carrion crow that was fighting over the intestines at her feet. Feng Hongyu was immediately startled, vaguely feeling that she had stepped on a string of sticky things. Caught off guard, she suddenly slipped and lost control of her body, stumbling forward. With a thud, the world became silent. Guidangtao and the others were dumbfounded. Even Lin, he had a strange expression on his face when he saw this scene. He could not speak for a long time. Due to the accidental fall, Feng Hongyu actually plunged into the bloody hole on the side of the rhinoceros spirit beast's body. What is this? With a piercing scream, Feng Hongyu hurriedly struggled to get out. Her entire body was covered in dark red blood and bodily fluids, and there was even half an intestine hanging from her shoulder. Coincidentally, her face was right in front of the head that was chewing on the intestines on the ground. No matter who it was, such an encounter would surely cause them to go mad from fright. Feng Hongyu had been acting all high and mighty just a moment ago, but now she was so scared that she peed her pants. Feng Hongyu didn't even bother crawl. She just sat on the ground and screamed as she desperately retreated. She left a string of wet marks on the ground. She didn't know if it was blood or urine, or if it was a mixture of the two. Lin, he couldn't help but laugh. This was really retribution. It was too fast. Chu Bubi, who was leading the way, quickly turned back when he heard the noise. He hurriedly ran over and helped Feng Hongyu up from the ground. In a panic, Feng Hongyu finally grabbed a life-saving straw. Without saying anything, she screamed and hid in Chu Bubi's arms. Smelling the pungent smell of blood, he helplessly watched Feng Hongyu rubbing the sticky and disgusting things on his body. Chu Bubi's face instantly turned green. The corner of his mouth twitched for a long time, but he was stunned and couldn't say a word. It's okay. It's okay, don't be afraid. A look of disgust flashed across Chu Bubi's face. Then, he resisted the nauseating disgust and hugged Feng Hongyu with his arms as he comforted her. Lin, he looked at him, then a Huang Xiaotao in his arms. He was instantly amused. The other party had such a cultivation companion. Comparisons were odious, and goods were thrown away. Guidangtao and Wang Feng didn't know whether to laugh or cry when they saw this scene. They tried hard to hold back their laughter for a long time. A woman like Feng Hongyu was simply a rare weirdo. After comforting her for a while, Feng Hongyu's emotions finally stabilized. However, when she looked at the disgusting things on her body, she turned her head and vomited Chu Booby waited on the side with his arms crossed. He looked at the mucus on his clothes. If it wasn't for the important plan, he would have kicked her. Everyone, don't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. They aren't aggressive. Chu Booby saw everyone looking at him with a strange expression, so he could only force a smile and explain to everyone. Everyone nodded. There was no doubt about this. After all, Feng Hongyu had plunged into the other party's stomach, but the other party didn't react at all. Otherwise, if it was aggressive, Feng Hongyu would have been eaten clean. Brother Chu, what the hell is that thing? It looks so creepy. Gui Dengtao couldn't help but ask. Even if they knew that it wasn't aggressive, just looking at it still made people tremble. It's just some spirit beasts that have formed their primordial spirits. After their physical bodies die, their primordial spirits naturally can't be kept, so they gradually disappear. They don't have any sanity to speak of, but they still have the instinct to survive, so they stay on their decaying bodies like vengeful spirits. That's why there's such a strange scene. In fact, they aren't aggressive. Chu Booby explained to everyone. I see. Everyone nodded. Everyone was a cultivator at the Gold Core stage, so they naturally knew about the primordial spirit. Chu Booby's explanation was reasonable and reasonable. Vengeful spirits were not rare for cultivators. Since there was a primordial spirit, it was not surprising that there were vengeful spirits that ordinary people talked about, because the two were actually the same existence. The ghost thing on Lin Yi's body was such a clear evidence. After listening to Chu Booby's explanation, Feng Hongyu, who was almost scared out of her wits, finally recovered, but she didn't dare to taunt others as arrogantly as before. She lowered her head and cleaned the dirty things on her body with a red face. Huang Xiaodao, who was hiding in Lin Yi's arms, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. People were most afraid of the unknown. Since this phenomenon could be explained, then there was nothing to be afraid of. Lin Yi lowered his head and pondered, thinking about whether Chu Booby's explanation was reliable or not. At this moment, a reminder suddenly sounded in his mind. He's lying, don't be fooled. And he hadn't heard this voice for a long time. Lin Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he reacted with surprise and joy. Senior Ghost. Chapter 4252. Oh, Ghost Cultivator? This was the first time Lin Yi had heard of this word. He couldn't help but ask, Senior Ghost, what exactly is a ghost cultivator? It's a type of evil cultivator among you human cultivators. Didn't you come here to kill Wu Baoyong? This guy should be an evil cultivator, but he used the blood of a virgin to cultivate, while the one in front of us used the primordial spirit of a spirit beast to cultivate. The ghostly thing's tone carried a bit of cold, killing intent. No matter what, it was still an elder of the spirit beast clan, and the existence of any ghost cultivator meant that a large number of spirit beasts would inevitably be killed. Not to mention that even the primordial spirit was not spared, so they wouldn't be able to die peacefully. The ghostly thing didn't have a character that abhorred evil. If it was just an ordinary fight, whether it was between humans and spirit beasts, or between spirit beasts, it would be too lazy to care. This was because the weak were prey to the strong. Survival of the fittest was the law of nature that had existed since ancient times. Even if they died, it could only be said that their skills were inferior to others, and there was nothing to blame. However, ghost cultivators were different. The existence of this kind of person was already against the natural order. Not to mention the heavens. Even if the heavens could tolerate them, the ghostly thing would be the first to not spare them. I understand, but why did Chu Booby make up such a reason? Is he a ghost cultivator? Lin Yi communicated with the ghostly thing while looking at Chu Booby in front of him. I don't know about that. He hasn't shown his true strength yet. Maybe he's pretending to know, or maybe he knows, but he's deliberately hiding it for some reason. Anyway, you should be careful. The ghostly thing cackled. And I know. Lin Yi nodded secretly. He originally felt that Chu Booby had hidden evil intentions. Now that the ghostly thing reminded him, this feeling became even stronger. As the saying goes, one who is unaccountably solicitous is hiding evil intentions. In fact, putting aside this kind of strangeness, Chu Booby had suddenly shared the news of the infant ginseng with outsiders who were completely unrelated to him. The matter itself was already very problematic. Even if it was as Chu Booby had said, that he needed more people to help him find the infant ginseng, but after all, the fertile water should not flow to outsiders. Why would he give such a great opportunity to outsiders, who he had no friendship with, and not look for his own friends and relatives? His social relations should not be so miserable that he could not even gather a few people, right? Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Gui Dangtao and Wang Feng had taken the bait, because Chu Booby was good at fooling people. They themselves were also blinded by the super temptation of the infant ginseng. But Lin, he had always been able to control his state of mind very well. He was able to look on coldly from the sidelines. That was how he was able to see all the strange things happening to Chu Booby. Senior Ghost, were you in seclusion during this period of time? Linny asked. Now, strictly speaking, they were standing on the edge of the South Island. Linny couldn't help but be curious. The ghostly thing suddenly woke up. Did it want to go back to the Spirit Beast clan to have a look? Seclusion? You can say that. The ghostly thing smiled indifferently. It should not be a traditional seclusion, but with Lin Yi's current realm, he might not be able to explain it clearly in a few words. He couldn't explain it clearly in 1 or 2 sentences, so he was too lazy to go into detail. This is the South Island, then you... Linny couldn't help but ask. What? Are you so anxious to drive me away? The ghostly thing asked back with a playful tone. No, how could it be? Lin, he couldn't help sweating. As the saying goes, having an old person at home is like having a treasure. Not to mention that the ghostly thing was a great god. He was more than happy that it was willing to stay in his jade pendant. How could it drive him away? That's it. The ghostly thing was just a primordial spirit, but it curled its lips. I just want to ask, Senior Ghost, do you want to take this opportunity to go home and have a look? Lin, he said helplessly. According to the ghostly thing itself, it had been many years since it went down to the secular world. Now that it was rare to come to the South Island, it couldn't just pass by without going home. What's the point of going back to see me in this ghostly appearance? Boy, remember that none of the Spirit Beast clan is kind. If those old guys really know that I look like this, I won't even be enough to fill the gap between their teeth. The ghostly thing said with a half-mocking and half-sighing tone. Lin, he couldn't help being speechless. Then he remembered that compared with human cultivators, the Spirit Beast clan followed the principle of the law of the jungle more. If it were a human being, even if he had this idea, he would at least pretend on the surface. But if it were a Spirit Beast, as soon as it saw that the ghost was so weak, it would directly attack it, no matter whether it was an elder or not. For the ghost now, the South Island was not a warm home, but a real dragon's pool and tiger's den. The example of Zhang Liju was still vivid in his mind. It didn't matter if you were a giant before or not. Once you lost your strength, it meant that you lost your status. Kid, don't think too much. I will definitely go back to the Spirit Beast clan, but not now. As for how long I have to wait, that depends on when you can help me. You should improve your strength first. If you can really get the baby ginseng, it will be a good opportunity. The ghostly thing smiled. Okay, I understand. Lin, he nodded secretly. When he first came to Sky Class Island, this ghostly thing asked him to help, but now that he was already a Golden Core early stage master, he still wasn't strong enough. It seemed that this wasn't an easy task. He had to work hard. After communicating with the ghostly thing for so long, only a short moment had passed in the outside world. Everyone was still thinking about Chu Booby's explanation, so naturally, they didn't notice Lin Yi's expression. Only Huang Xiaodao, who was in his arms, felt a little strange. What's wrong? Huang Xiaodao blinked and looked up at him. Chu Booby and the others heard the sound and thought that Lin Yi had discovered something unusual. They couldn't help but turn around and look at him in surprise. Oh, it's nothing. It's just that after listening to Brother Chu's explanation, I thought about the ghostly thing in the eyes of ordinary people, and I felt a little emotional. Lin Yi smiled calmly. Haha, people are so stupid. A lot of people who think they're smart think that the ghostly thing is just a rumor. They don't know that there's no smoke without a hole. The reason why these legends exist is because they are real. Chu Booby smiled faintly. Chapter 4253. Thinking back on this journey, Chu Booby's image in everyone's eyes could be said to be perfect. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but feel honored to be able to become teammates with such a person. Seeing that the infant ginseng was so close at hand, this was a blessing that couldn't be cultivated for several lifetimes. He couldn't help shaking his head when he saw this scene. Chu Booby was really good at acting. He had been on the Heaven Stage Island for more than a year and had seen many people, but he had never seen anyone as bewitching as Chu Booby. The best way to gain other people's trust was to make them worship you. Chu Booby had done this to perfection. He became even more vigilant towards Chu Booby, but he did not tell Huang Xiaotao about it. After all, the environment was too quiet. If there was even the slightest movement, no matter how soft the voice was, the people in front would be able to hear it. What's more, even if he could hide from these people's eyes and ears, he could not guarantee that Huang Xiaotao would be able to remain as calm and collected as him after knowing this. In front of a shrewd person like Chu Booby, any unnaturalness would become a flaw. He didn't want to take this risk. He didn't make a sound along the way because he was pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. If he revealed a flaw at this time, then he would have to give up halfway. Under Chu Booby's lead, everyone continued to follow the route on the map. More and more strange creatures similar to the rhinoceros spirit beast appeared in front of them. Some had no head, some had no limbs, some only had half a body, and some were just a pile of bones. All kinds of strange and evil existences challenged everyone's visual nerves. Although everyone had already heard Chu Booby's explanation and knew that these things were not aggressive, knowing it was one thing, and seeing it with their own eyes was another matter. Even if they knew that these things would not eat people, they still could not help but feel their scalps go numb when they saw this creepy scene. I'm a little scared. It's like it's real. Huang Xiaotao stuck close to Linny. He was so nervous that even his voice was trembling. It's okay. I'm here. They can't hurt you. He gently held her hand and comforted her. And Huang Xiaotao nodded weakly, although she was still unconsciously nervous and afraid. As long as he was holding her, she felt much more at ease. Unlike the others who were kept in the dark, he knew clearly after the ghost's reminder. These were not vengeful spirits that refused to leave, but low-level ghost talisman devils. They were evil things left behind by ghost cultivators. The reason why they were not aggressive was because they were all defective goods. But even so, when he saw such strange scenes one after another, especially when the surroundings were so gloomy and terrifying, even Lin Yi's forehead couldn't help but be covered in a layer of fine sweat. He was out of breath. Not only Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao, but Guodangtao, Wang Feng, and the others, especially Feng Hongyu, who had just made a big mistake, were also trembling at this moment. With every step she took, her whole body couldn't help but tremble. She no longer had the mood to taunt others as arrogantly as before. Perhaps it was because she had been frightened just now that she had seen a little bit of a horrifying scene. Feng Hongyu immediately screamed in fright. Even the people behind her were nervous. At first, they were just afraid. Originally, they were just afraid, but with a woman like Feng Hongyu, even if they weren't sick, they would be scared to the point of mental illness. Among the people, only Chu Booby didn't show any signs of nervousness or fear. He didn't care about this at all. He strode forward calmly and confidently as before. Lin Yi, who was behind him, couldn't help but be puzzled when he saw this scene. Was Chu Booby fearless because he was ignorant? Or was he already used to this kind of thing? Even if this person really thought that his far-fetched explanation was the truth of the matter, in such a strange environment, it was impossible for him to not show any signs of abnormality, right? Even if the ignorant were fearless, there would always be a limit, right? No matter how courageous one was, in the face of unknown and unfamiliar evil things, they would still be afraid. This was human nature, unless they were no longer human. Chu Booby was obviously not a human. After thinking about it, he could only conclude that his behavior could be attributed to two situations. Either this person wasn't as calm as he appeared, and was actually as nervous and fearful as everyone else, but he didn't want others to see through him, so he deliberately put on a brave face. Or this person had long been accustomed to everything in front of him, just like a forensic doctor who saw dead people every day. This kind of thing had become natural, and naturally he wouldn't have any fear. And what made Lin even more puzzled was that Chu Booby seemed to be very familiar with this place. He walked with his head held high, almost without any hesitation. Even if there was a blood moon illuminating the place, the light was definitely not good, not to mention that it was his first time coming to this place. Just by referring to the route map, wouldn't it take a lot of time? How could he not have the slightest bit of hesitation? This in itself was already a big flaw. Chu Booby had inadvertently revealed his fox's tail, but everyone was shocked by the strange environment, and their hearts were filled with fear. They didn't pay attention to his performance at all, but it was a pity that this couldn't be hidden from Lin Yi's eyes. "Brother Chu, did you come here last time?" Lin Yi suddenly asked without batting an eyelid. "Of course Chu Booby subconsciously wanted to answer, but then he couldn't help but stare blankly. He looked back at Lin Yi meaningfully, paused, and said, "I haven't been here before. From the map, this place is not far from our destination. If I came here last time, even if the time is limited, I would not be willing to go back empty-handed." "Why do you ask?" "Oh, actually it's nothing much. I just noticed that Brother Chu seems to be very familiar with this area. Furthermore, we didn't encounter any danger along the way. I believe that for anyone, this should be a very unbelievable thing." Lin Yi smiled naturally. "That's why I thought you'd already made a trip there last time, Brother Chu. If it wasn't for you, we might have all been wiped out." Chapter 4254. At this time, not only Lin Yi, but Gui Dengtao and the others also pricked up their ears. Before, they were confused by the situation and were unaware of this flaw. However, those who could become middle-stage Gold Core Masters could not be fools. Now, after listening to Lin Yi's reminder, there was a clear suspicion in their eyes. Chu Booby knew that if this problem could not be explained clearly immediately and could not convince them, all the previous efforts were likely to be in vain. He had already realized that he was a little too hasty because he was getting closer and closer to his destination. Otherwise, he wouldn't have exposed such an obvious flaw. Once this flaw was discovered, it wouldn't be something that could be brushed off with a simple excuse of ample preparation. It was all because of this Lin Yi. Chu Booby secretly glanced at Lin Yi angrily. Seeing that everyone's eyes were on him, he did not dare to hesitate too much and immediately turned his mind. "I won't hide it from you all. In addition to this map, my Chu family's ancestor also left behind a passage of words about their exploration experience at that time. It is very valuable as a reference, and I have a photographic memory since I was a child. No matter what I heard or saw, I can always remember it very clearly. After hearing it from the elders of my family, I remembered it in my heart, and now it has come in handy, so I can do this," Chu Booby casually explained. When he said this, Gui Dengtao and the others suddenly felt relieved. Not only did they not feel that this was a flaw, but they also felt that Chu Booby was really reliable. The fact that Chu Booby was willing to take out this family map and share it with everyone was already a very magnanimous act. The value of the Chu clan's ancestors' words was no less than that of the route map. If they were in Chu Booby's shoes, they definitely wouldn't have revealed it to them in advance. If he recklessly shared all the information, what would he do if someone suddenly went back on his word? Although Chu Booby was the strongest among them, they were in the depths of Lufeng Forest. Anyone who wanted to betray them only needed to go into the dense forest. Chu Booby would definitely not dare to easily chase them. So as the initiator, he must hide a little. So that's how it is. It's all thanks to Brother Chu. Lin Yi nodded with a faint smile, but he was still non-committal in his heart. Being fully prepared was one thing, but actually doing it was another matter. Chu Booby's explanation could deceive Gui Dengtao and others, but in Lin Yi's opinion, it was still very far-fetched. Lin Yi thought to himself, Chu Bubi was really good at bewitching people. It was unknown whether he had prepared this speech beforehand or just made it up on the spot. No matter which one it was, it only proved that this person was shrewd and could not be underestimated. All right, everyone, there's no need to pay too much attention to these things in front of us. They're just toys to scare people. Let's hurry up. We are not far from our destination. The nascent ginseng is right in front of us. Chu Bubi encouraged everyone. All right, upon hearing the two words, infant ginseng, everyone's eyes immediately lit up. They immediately threw the doubts that had just emerged to the back of their minds. All of them were excited and followed Chu Bubi to speed up. At this time, even the principle of not traveling at night in the dense forest had been completely forgotten by them. Anyway, there was still a blood moon above their heads, and the light was not bad. Who cared so much? Lin Yi saw this scene from behind. He knew that Chu Bubi was afraid that a long night would bring trouble, so he sped up. Pulling Huang Xiaodao, Lin Yi immediately followed the crowd. No matter what Chu Bubi was up to, as long as they were cautious, there was nothing to be afraid of. Even if there was an unexpected danger, there was still the jade pendant to warn them. They followed Chu Bubi all the way. Perhaps because this was the spirit beast graveyard, they did not encounter any danger except for some low-level ghost talisman demons from time to time. After an hour, there was a sudden medicinal fragrance in the air. When they smelled it carefully, it made them feel refreshed from head to toe. Even the qi in their bodies became active involuntarily. Everyone suddenly looked at each other, surprised. At their level of strength, if it was just an ordinary heaven and earth treasure, even if they took it, it would not have much effect. But now they just smelled it, and it had such a wonderful effect. The level of this heaven and earth treasure, wouldn't it break through the sky? After smelling this medicinal fragrance, Lin Yi was slightly stunned. He felt that it was a little familiar. After smelling it carefully a few more times, he finally remembered that this was the smell of nascent ginseng. When he refined the gathering nascent soul golden pill for the will of heaven, the main material used was nascent ginseng. Naturally, he was not unfamiliar with this smell. In fact, the final gathering nascent soul golden pill had a similar smell. If I'm not wrong, this is the fragrance of nascent ginseng. Chu Bubi could not help but be stunned. Then he suddenly changed his previous elegance and shouted excitedly, "Yes, we are almost there. Really?" Everyone was shocked and confused, and after hearing this, they almost jumped up in excitement. However, they were still in disbelief, as if they were dreaming. We really found the nascent ginseng. That's right, this is definitely the fragrance of nascent ginseng. Although I have never seen it before, Grandmaster Zhang Liju's rare herb collection of Heaven Class Island has a special record of it. The nascent ginseng grows in a place full of ghost energy, but it has an extraordinary fragrance. It is refreshing and can make people feel refreshed and full of essence, Chu Bubi said confidently. Taking out Grandmaster Zhang Liju's proof, it was reasonable and matched perfectly. No one doubted him at all. They all breathed out in relief and said excitedly, "We are finally here. This is great." Following Chu Bubi to the core of Lufeng Forest was a huge risk. If they were not careful, they would lose their lives here. But now, seeing that the nascent ginseng was within their reach, and even the fragrance was so clear, all their worries were gone. There was only one thing left, and that was to follow the fragrance to find the nascent ginseng and bring it out of Lufeng Forest. Those with bigger ambitions could think of a way to get someone to refine this nascent ginseng into a gathering nascent pill. If they really couldn't wait, they could trade this nascent ginseng. Chapter 4255. After the excitement, everyone quickened their pace under Chu Bubi's lead. The nascent ginseng that they yearned for in their dreams was right in front of them, and everyone was clearly unable to restrain themselves. It was as if even the exhaustion that had accumulated over the past few days had been swept away and had become light. However, Lin, he was a little puzzled at this time. To be honest, from the beginning, he had been suspicious of Chu Booby. He always felt that this person had an unspeakable conspiracy, and all the strange things along the way did prove this point. However, the medicinal fragrance of the nascent ginseng couldn't be deceived. Others had never seen the nascent ginseng before, so they could say that they were deceived by Chu Booby. But Lin, he had personally used the nascent ginseng to refine pills. As an alchemist, the smell of this kind of super rare material, as long as one smelled it once, it was impossible to forget it. This point couldn't be faked at all, and it was impossible to deceive Lin Yi. But if the smell was really the nascent ginseng, then what was Chu Booby's conspiracy? Using every possible means to bring so many people here, and now they were even about to find the nascent ginseng. Going around in such a big circle, what was his ulterior motive? So far, although there were all kinds of strange things about Chu Booby, he didn't cause any substantial harm to everyone. Instead, as he said, he really brought everyone to the destination, and they were only a few steps away from the legendary nascent ginseng. Moreover, the addition of everyone so far had not helped him at all, including Lin Yi. He didn't have any use at all, and just blindly followed him. Could it be that Chu Booby deliberately brought them here just to quickly find the nascent ginseng, and there was no other bad intention? Could it be that he was really thinking too much, and this person was not as scheming as he thought? However, all the strange things that happened along the way, how could he explain it? Lin Yi looked at the back of Chu Booby in front of him and couldn't help but be confused. Intuition told him that there must be a problem with this person, but it was really hard to say where the problem was. Holding Huang Xiaotao's hand, Lin Yi continued to follow the crowd in front of him. He was not afraid that Chu Booby would turn hostile at the end, but he was afraid that Chu Booby would have other plans that he could not guard against. If he was not careful, it would be troublesome. Of course, no matter what, Lin Yi's expectation for the infant ginseng was no less than that of anyone else present. Otherwise, he would not have taken Huang Xiaotao to take the risk despite knowing that Chu Booby had hidden evil intentions. He pretended to be a pig to eat a tiger, and the only thing he wanted was the infant ginseng. Therefore, Lin Yi was very excited to be able to smell the fragrance of the infant ginseng. Otherwise, if it was purely a trap set by Chu Booby and there was no infant ginseng at all, then it would be meaningless for him to pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger. Because of the encouragement from the fragrance of the nascent ginseng, everyone had long since thrown the little bit of nervousness and fear in their hearts to the back of their minds. Even if they saw some ghost talisman devil, they didn't care at all. Even Feng Hongyu, who had been greatly stimulated and left a shadow in her heart, followed Chu Booby all the way without any signs of timidity. However, everyone found that something was not quite right. The frequency of the terrifying things like the ghost talisman devil began to gradually decrease, but the atmosphere of the surrounding environment became colder and colder. Under everyone's eyes, the originally clear path in the jungle began to become blurred. Even the corner of everyone's eyes could even see a ghostly shadow flashing from time to time. Although they couldn't see clearly, the scene of the shadow jumping was real. They were all gold core stage masters with firm minds. They could be sure that this was definitely not an illusion. There must be something in it, and it was probably the unclean thing in the legend. At this moment, the previously thin fog had unknowingly become a lot thicker. Just now, they could clearly see the blood moon hanging upside down in the sky. But now, when they looked up at the sky, it was simply a blur. Even the figures that were only a few feet away from each other became blurred in the fog, and there was even a feeling of vague shadows. Coupled with the ghostly shadow flashing from the corner of their eyes from time to time, even though everyone was excited because of the infant ginseng, they couldn't help but shudder at this moment and felt a little guilty. Huang Xiaodao was so scared that she subconsciously stuck close to Lin Yi, not daring to look at the surrounding scene. Guo Dangtao, Wang Feng, Feng Hongyu, and the others in front were all tiptoeing like frightened birds, not daring to stride forward like before. In Lin Yi's heart, seeing this scene, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Although he wasn't afraid, There were ghostly shadows flashing from time to time. They felt that they were not far from them, but they couldn't see clearly what they were. In this situation, it was impossible for them to not be afraid. Fortunately, Lin E could be sure that the surrounding fog was not the poisonous fog above their heads. It could only affect everyone's perception, but it wouldn't kill them. This was a blessing in disguise. Otherwise, even if they knew that there was an infant ginseng in this place, they had to quickly retreat. No matter how good the infant ginseng was, they had to be alive to obtain it. If they continued to stay here, they would only become fertilizer for the infant ginseng. There is no way forward. Feng Hongyu suddenly exclaimed in front of them. She was following Chu Booby at the front, and the others were following behind them. Only she and Chu Booby knew the situation in front of them the best. What? Gui Dengtao and Wang Feng were shocked and quickly went forward to check the situation. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao looked at each other and followed. The six of them stood in a circle and looked at the path that had completely disappeared. They couldn't help but look at each other in dismay, not knowing what to do. Although the fog had become thicker and their feet had become blurry, they could still see the outline of the path. But now, even the basic outline was gone. There were only dense bushes and bushes in front of them. It seemed that this was the end of the path. Brother Chu, could it be that we've gone the wrong way? Gui Dengtao couldn't help but ask. When a path suddenly came to an end, a normal person's first reaction would be to get lost. After all, this place was covered in fog, and visibility was very limited. It was normal to get lost. No, I've been referring to the map and compass. The direction is definitely correct. Everyone doesn't need to panic. This path was passed down by my ancestors. I don't know how many years it has been since someone used it. It's normal for the path to disappear, said Chu Booby calmly. R1152. Chapter 4256. Everyone seemed to be infected by Chu Booby's calmness and nodded. They were no longer as panicked as before. Then what do we do next? Gui Dengtao asked. Naturally, we will continue forward. We have already reached this step, and we can only watch helplessly as the nascent ginseng is right in front of us. We can't let such a small obstacle go to waste. Chu Booby said lightly. Wang Feng couldn't help but nervously ask, but the fog is so thick, and there are no small paths. We have no idea what's going on ahead. Gui Dengtao and the others nodded in agreement. Lin Yi had also tried earlier and found that this place was very strange. Not only was the fog too thick, but he couldn't see much with his eyes. Even with his divine sense, he couldn't sense what was going on ahead. Under normal circumstances, although they couldn't see it with their eyes, they could still sense it with their divine sense. If even divine sense was blocked, then this place was definitely strange. Perhaps there was some formation, or perhaps this place was naturally like this. For example, there was a magnetic field that could also affect divine sense. No matter which one it was, it meant that this place was no small matter and couldn't be entered easily. Although we can't completely see what's going on ahead, after walking for so long, we're already familiar with this place, so there's no need to worry too much. Chu Booby comforted everyone. For us, the biggest threat in Lufeng Forest is spirit beasts. However, this place is a graveyard for spirit beasts. Other than spirit beasts that are about to die, other spirit beasts won't come here. Otherwise, we would have encountered them long ago. What do you guys think? Brother Chu's words make sense. Gui Dengtao and the others nodded. Other than those strange and disgusting things, there were no living spirit beasts. Furthermore, there was no miasma, so it naturally wasn't a threat to them. Along the way, everyone's trust in Chu Booby had gradually accumulated to the point of blindness. His words could be said to be unquestionable, and his words were indeed reasonable and convincing. So, even if we can't see what's going on ahead, we don't need to scare ourselves. As long as we're careful, we won't fail at the last moment. Chu Booby continued to explain with a calm expression. I've encountered this situation in other places before. I also couldn't see the road clearly, and I couldn't even sense it with my divine sense. However, in the end, there wasn't any danger. It was just like a ghost hitting a wall. Ghost its wall? Everyone could not help but look at each other. Even Lin, he was slightly taken aback. This saying was widely spread among the people and was often mentioned in the cultivation world. In the end, it could be concluded that it was nothing more than a natural maze or a formation. But no matter which one it was, there wasn't any actual danger. It was just that they couldn't find the exit and were running around in circles. It was purely a waste of time. So when they heard Chu Booby's words, everyone immediately felt relieved. However, although they all breathed a sigh of relief, no one dared to walk forward rashly. They all looked at each other, and no one was willing to take the lead. Even if there was nothing to be afraid of, what if this wasn't? What if there was some kind of death trap? There was a momentary stalemate. Everyone's eyes finally fell on Chu Booby. Their meaning was obvious. Chu Booby was the one leading the way. At this juncture, naturally, Chu Booby should be the one taking the lead. After all, he was the leader. However, for some reason, Chu Booby did not continue to take the lead this time. He looked around at everyone and said in a deep voice, "It's just a ghost hitting a wall. There's nothing to be afraid of. Now, everyone will line up in order. Taozi will take the lead in front, and I will hold the rear. What do you think?" This, Guidangtao suddenly hesitated. He had no objection to others not taking the lead, but he was unlucky. He could not help but twitch his mouth. "Brother Chu, it's not that I don't want to, but I don't know the way. I've never been to this place, and I'm not familiar with your family's map. Even if I follow the map, it's easy to get lost. Not to mention, I can't even see the road in front. That's okay. I will hold the rear and give you directions at any time. That way, there won't be any mistakes," Chu Booby said with certainty. Then, okay. At this point, Guidangtao could not refuse anymore, so he had to bite the bullet and take the lead. Everyone lined up in a straight line, with Guidangtao in the lead and Wang Feng following closely behind, just a step behind Guidangtao. Behind them were Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao, and finally Feng Hongyu and Chu Booby, who was responsible for holding the rear. Guidangtao was very careful. Every step he took trembling with fear, as if he was walking on thin ice for fear of falling into some fatal trap. However, Chu Booby would give out orders every few steps. Just like that, everyone walked through the fog for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, but they didn't encounter any accidents or dangers. Lin Yi turned his head and looked at the front and back. Although they were only a step apart in this fog, even if it was just a small distance, the figures had become a little blurred. It could be seen how terrible the visibility was. However, Lin Yi was more puzzled at the moment, and it was because of Chu Booby's deliberate arrangement. Everyone knew that in this situation, it was clearly the most appropriate for him to be the first. Not only was it because he was the most familiar with the map and it was not easy to get lost, but it was also because he was a master in the late gold core stage, and he was the strongest among them. Indeed, a strong person was needed to hold the rear, but in terms of the degree of danger and challenge, it was obvious that the person walking in the front was higher. If there was any danger, he would be able to respond faster. With the shrewdness shown by Chu Booby, it was impossible for him not to understand this kind of thing, but he still had to stay at the back. Lin Yi thought about it, and there were only two possibilities. Either he felt that this place was dangerous, so he let Guidangtao and a few others walk in front as cannon fodder. Even if there was an accident, he could escape in time. Or he had ulterior motives and had other intentions, but it was unknown what kind of bad intentions it was. The moonlight was hazy, and the visibility was only a step away from the heavy fog. There was also an unknown existence that was looming in the fog. It was like a ghost fire, but it did not feel like a ghost fire, but more like a ghost shadow. It formed an extremely strange and evil picture. Everyone did not dare to breathe. Listening to the command of Chu Booby, one by one, they lined up in the fog. If it was an ordinary person, seeing the ghost shadows flashing around them from time to time, their heart would probably jump out. Fortunately, everyone was a master in the gold core stage, and their minds were far more tenacious than ordinary people. Some nervousness and fear were inevitable, but did not affect their actions. Chapter 4257. In their eyes, there was nothing to be afraid of, even if there were some legendary ghosts and monsters. Ghosts were just a form of spirit. No matter how powerful they were far less powerful than cultivators. Everyone secretly cheered themselves on. After walking for half an hour without any accidents, they could not help but feel a lot more at ease. Their footsteps were no longer as timid as before. However, after a while, Lin Yi suddenly felt that something was wrong. The jade panda began to give a faint warning. His heart suddenly quivered. There's a problem. Xiaodao. Lin Yi subconsciously tightened his grip on Huang Xiaodao's hand. At the same time, he turned his head and looked around. In the end, he found that apart from Huang Xiaodao, no one else had disappeared. Previously, no matter how thick the fog was, because they were only 1 or 2 steps away from each other, they could still see a vague shadow. However, there was not even a shadow now. Guo Dangtao and Wang Feng, who were walking in front, and Chu Bubi and Feng Hongyu, who were walking behind, had suddenly disappeared. Sure enough, there was a problem. Lin Yi was shocked. At the same time, he could not help but feel lucky. Fortunately, he had been holding Huang Xiaodao. Otherwise, Huang Xiaodao might have disappeared with them. What's going on? Why did the others disappear? Huang Xiaodao finally realized that something was wrong. Her voice was trembling. After all, she was a girl. In such a strange environment, she was very nervous. Don't act rashly. Let's observe the situation first, Lin Yi said in a low voice. At the same time, he turned his head and looked around. He tried to release his divine sense. However, it was the same as before. His divine sense, which had worked many times outside, was like a stone sinking into the sea. There was no reaction at all. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly sounded not far behind. It was Chu Bubi, who had disappeared. This is the ghost fog array. We can't stay here for long. Everyone, rush forward. As long as we keep rushing forward, we will be able to pass. As soon as the voice fell, there were a few swishing sounds. It was clear that someone was rushing forward quickly. Hearing this, Huang Xiaodao subconsciously rushed forward. However, before she could take a step, she was pulled back by Lin Yi. Xiaodao, calm down. Lin Yi shouted in a low voice. Although this sound was not loud, it was like a morning bell. It struck directly at Huang Xiaodao's heart, causing her body to suddenly tremble. After that, she abruptly woke up with a start and had an astonished expression. What happened to me just now? Huang Xiaodao couldn't help but feel scared. Just now, Chu Bubi's voice seemed to have some kind of bewitching magic that made her lose her mind. That was why she subconsciously obeyed the other party's orders. If Lin Yi hadn't pulled her back in time, who knew where she would have gone by now? You must have been bewitched just now. This Chu Bubi fellow is really strange. Lin Yi vigilantly observed his surroundings and cautiously said. At this moment, he finally understood Chu Bubi's intentions. Along the way, everyone had been following him, thus establishing enough trust. At the same time, they subconsciously let down their guard. She began to follow his orders blindly. Especially after entering the fog, almost every step was taken according to Chu Bubi's instructions, which further strengthened this subconscious habit. In addition, this person's voice just now clearly had the effect of bewitching people's minds, which made everyone subconsciously follow his orders. This was a trap set from the beginning. From the moment they agreed to join the group, everyone had actually fallen into Chu Bubi's rhythm of hypnosis. Chu Bubi, this person's mind was actually deep to this extent. Fortunately, Lin Yi had been suspicious of him from beginning to end. He had been paying attention to all kinds of strange things, so he didn't take the bait as easily as the others. Moreover, with his tenacious mind, how could he be bewitched by an ordinary person? Although Lin Yi heard that something was wrong, he couldn't see the situation clearly in this place, so he didn't dare to act rashly. At this moment, he couldn't care about the others and could only take care of Huang Xiaodao. Bewitching? No wonder it seemed to be involuntary just now, and my body didn't listen to me. Hearing Lin Yi's words, Huang Xiaodao was suddenly shocked. At the same time, She secretly rejoiced that she had Lin Yi by her side. She couldn't help but ask nervously, "Then what should we do now?" "I can't see the situation clearly, so I'll have to stay here for a while." Lin, he said as he strained his ears to listen in on their surroundings. In this situation, his eyes and divine sense were useless. Only his ears were slightly better. If there was any movement around, he could at least hear some sounds. Huang Xiaodao nodded with lingering fear. She held Lin Yi's hand tightly with one hand, and at the same time, like Lin Yi, she carefully watched everything around them. The two of them waited quietly for a moment, but there was no movement around them at all. In Lin Yi's view, no matter what tricks Chu Bubi played, Gui Dangtao and Wang Feng were real masters of the Gold Core realm. Even if they fell into any tricks, there should be a little room for them to struggle. It wouldn't be so quiet and directly killed, right? Of course, if he thought about it in an extreme way, Chu Bubi had spent so much effort to bring everyone here. With his shrewdness, he should not leave any room for them to turn the tables. It was not impossible for Guo Dengtao and the others to disappear silently. But the problem was, Chu Bubi had spent so much effort to bring people who had nothing to do with him to such a place, and then killed them. What was the purpose of this? Lin Yi could not figure out this problem for a while, but he could faintly feel that this matter should be related to the infant ginseng. After all, the medicinal fragrance of the infant ginseng could not be faked, but it was hard to say what the specific relationship was. Have they gone far away? Or Huang Xiaodao held Lin Yi's hand tightly and did not dare to continue halfway through her words, because at this moment, she could still see ghosts flashing around from the corner of her eyes from time to time. If Gui Dengtao and the others did not have an accident, Chu Bubi would definitely have countermeasures when he found that the two of them did not follow. Even if he did not come back to look for them personally, he should find a way to send a signal or something. But now, there was no movement at all in front of them. If Lin Yi's guess was right, and Chu Bubi really had ulterior motives, Gui Dengtao and the others were most likely to be in danger. Thinking of this, Huang Xiaodao could not help but have goosebumps. If Lin Yi did not hold her back just now, she would definitely die together with them. I don't know. For now, we can only take one step at a time. Lin, he said in a deep voice. He was also uncertain in his heart and could only wait and see for the time being. Chapter 4258. There are all kinds of unknowns around, and they could all be fatal dangers. The only thing that made Lin Yi feel at ease was that at this moment, the jade pendant was no longer warning. Not to mention Chu Bubi, at least one thing was certain, it was safe for the time being. However, temporary safety did not mean that it would always be safe. On the one hand, Lin Yi didn't want to stay in the same place for too long. On the other hand, he wanted to know what Chu Bubi was doing. So, he held Huang Xiaodao tightly and walked forward carefully. However, after a few steps, the jade pendant began to warn again. The further they went, the more intense the warning became. Lin, he was finally sure that this place was definitely not ordinary, and there was a 100% problem ahead. After understanding this, Lin, he stopped moving forward. He directly took Huang Xiaodao and stopped again. Are we not going? Huang Xiaodao turned to look at Lin Yi in surprise. Yes, we're not going. Lin Yi nodded. He was not a fool. Knowing that there was a dragon's pool and a tiger's den ahead, he still wanted to take Huang Xiaodao. It was not called being bold, but having a hole in his brain. Then Huang Xiaodao looked at the fog around them, and the ghostly shadows flashed from time to time. She couldn't help but shrink her neck. It's okay. We'll stay here. There is no danger. Lin Yi smiled comfortingly. Staying in the same place could maximize their vigilance. Plus, the jade pendant could warn them in advance, so there was nothing to be afraid of. Okay. Huang Xiaodao nodded obediently. Although she was still nervous, she would do whatever Lin Yi said. Time passed by bit. In the blink of an eye, the sky had begun to brighten, indicating that a whole night had passed. However, the fog did not dissipate because of this. Compared to the night, the visibility was slightly better, but it was very limited. What surprised Lin Yi was he and Huang Xiaotao stayed here for a whole night, but they did not encounter any situation. There was no danger, but there was no news of those people in front. Chu Bubi, Gui Dengtao, and the others seemed to have disappeared into thin air. Although Lin Yi was puzzled, he was not in a hurry. As an assassin, he did not lack patience. Huang Xiaodao, who was with him, was a girl. Although he was a little afraid of this strange and evil environment, he had spent the past few years completing trial missions, so his patience was naturally top-notch. Just like that, the two of them waited in the same place for an entire night, but they didn't show any signs of impatience. After another 6 to 8 hours, they estimated that it should be noon. Lin Yi, why don't we leave? Huang Xiaodao looked at Lin Yi anxiously. It was not that she had run out of patience, but this place was simply too horrifying. From time to time, he would see a ghostly shadow flashing by, but he couldn't figure out what it was. The more he thought about it, the more numb his scalp became. Let's wait a little longer. Lin Yi held Huang Xiaotao in his arms to comfort her. Since things had developed to this point, turning around and leaving was indeed the safest thing to do. After all, they had the route map that Chu Bubi had given them, and they had already walked it once. It shouldn't be a problem for them to return the way they came. However, Lin didn't want to give up just like that. If he didn't smell the medicinal fragrance of the infant ginseng, then it would be fine. But now he was sure that there must be infant ginseng around. Turning around and leaving because of an unknown threat, if it was anyone else, they would not be willing. Even if they successfully escaped, they would definitely regret it when the time came. Instead of regretting, it was better to wait and see. Of course, even if he was unwilling to leave just like that, Lin Yi couldn't bring Huang Xiaotao to take risks. He still had a sense of propriety. Oh, Huang Xiaotao didn't say anything else. She just leaned against Lin Yi and continued to wait quietly. In the blink of an eye, another 8 to 10 hours had passed. The sky had turned dark again, and the surroundings became gloomy and ghostly again. However, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao still didn't receive any news. There was no news from the people in front of them from beginning to end. This time, even the originally calm Lin Yi couldn't help but feel doubtful. Could it really be the ghost fog array that Chu Bubi mentioned? Although it was indeed dangerous, it would be fine as long as they rushed over. Could it be that Chu Bubi, Gui Dengtao, and the others had left through other routes after obtaining the nascent ginseng? His mind was full of question marks, which made Lin Yi lose confidence in his original judgment. Lin even felt that if he continued to wait here, he might not see anything even after a few more days. Although it was safe for now, who knew what would appear in this place after a long time? They had already waited for a day and a night. If they continued to wait, it would probably be a waste of time. After thinking about it, Lin Yi finally made up his mind to bring Huang Xiaotao back first. However, just as he was about to speak to Huang Xiaodao, there was suddenly the sound of messy footsteps and heavy breathing coming from not far in front of the fog. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao's hearts suddenly tightened. The two of them looked at each other and quickly mobilized the qi in their bodies. They were fully alert while trying to sense the situation in front of them. Amidst the thick fog, not far ahead, a figure appeared indistinctly. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao were shocked at the same time. Although it was only a general outline, they had been following this person for the past few days. The person in the fog in front of them was Chu Bubi, who had disappeared for a whole day and night. At this moment, Chu Bubi was madly running in the direction of Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. It seemed that there was something chasing him from behind. He was a late-stage golden core practitioner, and yet he was being chased to the point where his steps were messed up. Even if they couldn't see his face clearly, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao could clearly feel his panic at this moment. It was simply unimaginable. Lin Yi couldn't help but secretly wonder who was behind Chu Bubi. Chu Bubi didn't look like a weak person. Judging from his aura, even if he was in the late gold core stage, he wouldn't be weak. To be able to make him so embarrassed, could it be a powerful existence in the nascent soul stage? While Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao were in a daze, they heard Chu Bubi running in a panic and seemed to be very surprised and unwilling. He muttered to himself in disbelief, "Phew, it shouldn't be. This ginseng clearly only needs to be sacrificed with the golden cores of 5 masters in the gold core realm. It will no longer have any offensive power." This is what Grandpa said himself. It can't be wrong. The ghost talisman devils that I controlled should have already led them over. Why are they still? GA. The voice stopped abruptly here. An extremely shrill scream was heard. Then the figure that was getting closer and closer to Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao was hit by some powerful evil attack and turned into a mist of blood. Chapter 42-59. Chu Bubi, the scheming late-stage gold core master, was directly obliterated in front of the eyes of Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. Lin Yi couldn't help but be flabbergasted when he witnessed this unbelievable scene with his own eyes. Huang Xiaodao, who was beside him, was even more shocked by this extremely bloody scene, and she cried out involuntarily. 3W. At this time, Lin Yi suddenly woke up, but it was too late. Huang Xiaodao's scream attracted the thing that was chasing Chu Bubi. Lin Yi hurriedly stood in front of Huang Xiaodao. The unknown existence in front of him carried an indescribable but incomparably powerful aura. It swept towards the two of them at an extremely fast speed. Even the surrounding layers of fog seemed to take the initiative to clear the way for it. Lin Yi's eyelids twitched wildly. When the existence in front of him was within 10 feet, he could see its appearance clearly. It was actually a little golden person. At this time, even Lin Yi finally couldn't stay calm. What the hell is this? An existence that could kill Chu Bubi so effortlessly. No matter how he looked at it, it had to be a powerful monster. Lin Yi had even thought that it was some powerful spirit beast of a nascent soul stage. But the one in front of him was just a pocket-sized golden human. It didn't seem powerful at all. Xiaodao beat him. Although he had doubts in his heart, Lin Yi did not dare to neglect. He immediately asked Huang Xiaodao to cooperate with him, and the frenzied 8 trigrams palm strike was fully launched. If it wasn't for Chu Bubi's example, he might have really let his guard down. Now that the bloody example was right in front of him, Lin Yi had to be tired of living if he still underestimated the golden dwarf. What's more, this golden person came aggressively. Wherever it passed, even the thick fog around it took the initiative to open the way for it. If he couldn't even see this extraordinary thing, Lin Yi would not be able to live to this day. Boom! After such a long period of practice, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao's teamwork was already very good. In the blink of an eye, 2 palms of raging fire, 8 trigrams, struck the golden dwarf's body at the same time. The golden dwarf that was charging toward the two of them didn't even have the time to attack before it was sent flying by Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. It fell to the ground after flying a few hundred feet and twitched a few times. Only then did he finally stop moving. However, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao did not let their guard down because of this. After all, this thing was a powerful existence that could kill Chu Bubi. With the power of the two's frenzied fire 8 trigrams palm attack, they could seriously injure it, but they might not be able to kill it directly. What if it was faking its death? Lin Yi gave Huang Xiaodao a look, and Huang Xiaodao nodded knowingly. The two of them joined forces to be on guard. Step by step, he approached the little golden person in the distance. During this process, what made the two extremely surprised was that the thick fog around them gradually thinned and the visibility became much better. Their divine senses also began to return to normal, and the fog gradually dissipated. Lin Yi was even more surprised. Just now, he felt that the origin of the golden dwarf seemed to have something to do with the fog. Now, this speculation was even more confirmed. This golden dwarf could actually control such a troublesome fog. What kind of divine being was it? Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao carefully stepped forward and found that the golden dwarf seemed to have been killed and could no longer move. However, before the two of them could breathe a sigh of relief, the golden dwarf's corpse suddenly moved. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao were shocked at the same time and subconsciously wanted to add another frenzied fire 8 trigrams palm attack. However, when they saw the changes in the golden dwarf's body, the two of them were dumbfounded on the spot. Is this the legendary fairy? Huang Xiaodao was stunned for a long time, and after a long time, she weakly squeezed out a sentence. She really couldn't think of any other word to describe the scene in front of her other than fairy. Lin Yi also choked for a long time. Right before their eyes, in just a short moment, the golden dwarf's corpse had actually shrunk and deformed. It wasn't a fake death, nor was it a corpse that had suddenly changed its appearance. Previously, it was still a miniature, pocket-sized golden dwarf, but all of a sudden, it no longer looked like a human. Its limbs had turned into roots, and its head and body didn't look human at all, revealing its original form after death. Just from this point alone, it really wasn't much different from the fairy in the legends. It was said that once a spirit beast reached a certain realm, it could transform into a human form. Wasn't this exactly the case? The two of them looked at each other. When Huang Xiaodao thought about these strange things, she didn't dare to look at it anymore. However, after staring at it for a while, a thought suddenly flashed in Lin Yi's mind, and he hurriedly picked it up. Huang Xiaodao was startled and hurriedly took 2 steps back, but she was held back by Lin Yi's hand. "Don't be afraid, Xiaodao. We have a big harvest this time. Quickly come and take a look." Lin Yi carefully looked at the thing in his hand, and the excitement on his face was obvious. Harvest? Harvest? Huang Xiaotao was stunned, and only then did she dare to look at the thing again. After looking at it carefully, she suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but ask in surprise and doubt. "You mean?" "That's right, this is the target of our trip, the nascent ginseng," Lin Yi said excitedly. In fact, from a moment the golden dwarf appeared, he had felt suspicious. This was because the unique medicinal fragrance of the nascent ginseng was obviously much stronger than before. However, at that time, his focus was on the golden dwarf's strength and the changes in the surrounding fog, so he didn't have time to carefully consider this point. He didn't expect that this thing was actually the nascent ginseng. This thing is really the nascent ginseng. Huang Xiaodao's first reaction was not surprise, but her expression became extremely strange. In her past knowledge and imagination, there was only one way for treasures, such as elixirs, to exist, and that was to grow from the ground. However, the thing in front of her, although it looked like an elixir when it was alive, not only could it run and jump, but it could even force Chu Booby, a master in the late stage of the Gold Core realm, into a mess and easily kill him. Was this also an elixir? This time, Huang Xiaodao's understanding was subverted. She stared at the thing in Lin Yi's hand and was speechless for a long time. In fact, if he hadn't personally refined the nascent ginseng into a gathering nascent golden pill, Lin Yi wouldn't believe that this thing was really the nascent ginseng. Yes, so our trip was not in vain. After Lin Yi confirmed it again and again, he nodded excitedly. Previously, the will of heaven only gave him a thumb-sized piece of nascent ginseng, and he was able to successfully refine a gathering nascent golden pill. Now he had a whole plant in his hand. Chapter 4260. If they were all used to refine golden elixirs of gathering nascent soul, how many elixirs would there be? Just thinking about it was enough to make one speechless with excitement. With a nascent ginseng in his hand, even if he didn't do anything else in this trip to the South Island, he would already have a great harvest and a bountiful bowl. Life was really unpredictable. It was really a wise move to come to Lufeng Forest this time. Great. Huang Xiaodao digested it for a long time and finally accepted the reality that this thing was nascent ginseng. She was finally happy. However, thinking of the situation just now, she immediately became gloomy and said, "It's a pity that Chu Booby and Guadengtao, although they had only known each other for a few days and didn't communicate much with each other," in Huang Xiaodao's view. After all, these people could be regarded as her teammates. They all came here to take risks for the nascent ginseng. As a result, they accidentally got the nascent ginseng, but things had changed. Chu Bubi died, tragically in front of them. As for Gui Dengtao, Wang Feng, and Feng Hongyu, although they didn't see it with their own eyes, even Chu Bubi, who was the strongest among them, ended up like this. Needless to say, they must be dead. After so many years, Huang Xiaodao had already adapted to the rhythm of the trial task and experienced the tragic death of her teammates many times. If it were others, they might have already become numb, but as a girl who was soft on the outside and tough on the inside, she might never turn a blind eye to it. Even though they had only known each other for a short period of time and did not have much of a relationship with each other, Huang Xiaodao still saw them as teammates from the bottom of her heart. She felt sorrow for their tragic death from the bottom of her heart, and she did not secretly rejoice because of the competition for benefits between them. It's really a pity for Wu Dengtao and Wang Feng. Lin Yi patted Huang Xiaodao's shoulder to comfort her, then changed his tone and said, "But Chu Bubi deserved to die." Why do you say that?" Huang Xiaodao was stunned, just like the others. Along the way, she felt that Chu Bubi was actually quite steady and reliable. "Xiaodao, have you forgotten what he just said before he died?" He shook his head and said, "What he said before he died?" Huang Xiaodao thought for a moment and said in confusion, "I think it was about 5 golden core stage experts offering sacrifices or something. That's right. It's fine if Gui Dengtao and the others are acquainted with him. However, the two of us are total strangers to him. Regarding such an important secret like the infant ginseng, a normal person wouldn't share it, right?" He smiled coldly and said, "But not only did he do that, he even asked us to join him. Xiaodao, don't you think it's very strange? There is no such thing as a free lunch. There is no such thing in the cultivation world. Now that you mention it, it is indeed very strange." Only then did Huang Xiaodao realize that she had been letting Lin Yi make all the decisions. She didn't think too much about it before, but now that he mentioned it, she immediately came to a realization. So, the 5 gold core stage priests that he mentioned before his death, it is very obvious which 5 people he was referring to. Yi said in a deep voice, "Besides Chu Bubi himself, you, me, Gui Dengtao, Wang Feng, and Feng Hongyu are just enough to gather 5 gold core stage experts. According to what he said just now, as long as the 5 of us are sacrificed, the infant ginseng will not have any attack power. At that time, he can enjoy it alone. His evil intentions are really bad. That's too vicious. In that case, Gui Dengtao and the others were all killed by him." Huang Xiaodao was shocked. Thinking about it carefully, it was really like this. She suddenly broke into a cold sweat. She secretly rejoiced that Lin Yi's judgment was correct. If it wasn't for Lin Yi pulling her in time, she would have become the opponent's stepping stone. With Chu Bubi's shrewdness, if it was anyone else instead of Lin Yi, he would be able to fool them. At that time, the 5 gold core stage masters would become his pawns and tools, and he would quietly trick them into sacrificing the infant ginseng. According to the attack power shown by the infant ginseng before, ordinary gold core stage experts would only be courting death if they went up. Once the 5 gold core stage experts died, no one would be able to compete with Chu Bubi. At the same time, the infant ginseng would lose its attack power and become a treasure that could be easily obtained. This was really killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Chu Bubi was a schemer. From the beginning to the end, he made a big trap. He used the infant ginseng as bait and waited for everyone to drill into it. Unfortunately, he didn't expect that Lin Yi would be so wary of him. He and Huang Xiaodao didn't rush over at all, and in the end, they were killed by the infant ginseng. He spent so much effort, but in the end, it ended up benefiting Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. If Chu Bubi knew about this, he would probably die with regrets. From the beginning, I saw that there was a problem with Chu Bubi, but I didn't expect this person to be so insidious. For the infant ginseng, he didn't hesitate to use the lives of the 5 of us to pave the way. His heart is really insidious. He shook his head and sighed. But Feng Hongyu is his Dao companion. How can this person be so cruel? Huang Xiaodao still felt that it was a little hard to believe. In front of the infant ginseng, he can even kill his own father and brother, let alone a Tao companion. Chu Bubi is an ambitious person. His thoughts are different from us. Lenny paused and then said with some regret, "It's a pity for Guo Dangtao and Wang Feng. Although I'm not familiar with them, I can see that they aren't insidious people. It's just that they met a teammate like Chu Bubi and died." Hearing this, Huang Xiaodao also lowered her head sadly. She survived because of Lin Yi, but no one could save Guo Dangtao and Wang Feng. The cultivation world was cruel. Lin Yi couldn't care about everyone's life and death. The only thing he could do was to take care of the people around him. As for the others, they could only pray for their own good luck. However, it requires the sacrifice of 5 golden core stage experts to make it lose its aggressiveness. This infant ginseng is worthy of being called the best among the elixirs. Seeing Huang Xiaotao's heavy mood, Lin Yi changed the topic and said while weighing the infant ginseng in his hand, "Yes, no wonder the infant ginseng can't even be heard of in the market. It's already so rare and difficult to find, but it also requires the sacrifice of 5 golden core stage experts. The difficulty is really unimaginable. If picking ginseng is so difficult every time, how many people will die?" Huang Xiaodao's attention was indeed diverted. She covered her mouth in surprise. However, before the two of them could take more than a few steps, they saw something behind them. Suddenly, a bone-chilling, strange laughter rang out, and all the carrion-eating crows within a radius of several dozen kilometers instantly scattered in fright. It was truly hair-raising. Lin Yi was instantly shocked, and he hurriedly protected Huang Xiaodao behind him while he couldn't help but feel regretful in his heart. Earlier, he'd unexpectedly obtained the nascent ginseng, and he'd become slightly complacent in the end. He would have left long ago after taking the things. Why would he stay with Huang Xiaodao in this troublesome place? However, other than being overly excited, the fog had not completely dissipated. If it were someone else, they probably wouldn't be in such a hurry to leave. Lin Yi's reaction could only be considered normal. At most, he was a little careless. It was accompanied by a creepy laughter. A figure suddenly descended from the sky. Lin Yi followed the voice and looked up. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart. This person had actually descended from the sky from a height of several dozen zhang. The gray clothes on his body seemed to be specially made. As he stretched out his limbs, they looked like bat wings. He could glide in the air, and he could also change his direction flexibly to quickly shuttle through the dense forest. Seeing this, Huang Xiaodao cried out in alarm. At first glance, this person looked like a huge gray-skinned bat. She had just seen the nascent ginseng that had transformed into a small golden person. She had thought that this person wasn't a human, but a spirit beast that had transformed into a human form. Lin Yi was also secretly shocked. Of course, what shocked him wasn't whether this person was a human or a beast, but that the other party had actually swooped down from a height of several dozen zhang. Could it be that he wasn't afraid of the layer of miasma above his head? After all, the height of the miasma was only a few dozen zhang. Lin Yi was sure that this person was definitely a human. However, it didn't make sense for a human cultivator to be able to ignore the miasma. Even if he wasn't afraid of being poisoned, the effect of the miasma on one's senses was no less than that of the fog. To be able to clearly sense Lin Yi and Huang Xiaotao in the miasma, how terrifying was this person's strength? Before they could react, the gray-clothed person whistled and landed not far away from the two of them. Only then did the two of them see his appearance clearly. It was a middle-aged man with a naturally sinister face. This person's most prominent characteristic was his tall, hooked nose. His pair of small but focused eyes were accompanied by a sinister smile. He was obviously a human cultivator, but standing in front of them, he gave off a dangerous aura like that of a wild beast. It unconsciously caused their hair to stand on end and their hearts to tremble. Lin Yi's heart immediately sank. It wasn't because of this person's appearance, but because he couldn't see through his opponent's strength. This meant that this person was at least of the original infant stage. With a great enemy in front of them, it was impossible to escape at this time. Ignoring the fact that this person was strong, it could be seen from the way he appeared that this person was a speed type. It was impossible for Lin Yi to escape with Huang Xiaodao. Moreover, even if they could escape with such a close distance, Lin Yi wouldn't dare to leave his back to an original infant stage cultivator. Not only was this extremely unwise, it was also a taboo in Jianghu. It was no different from courting death. Haha, it really is the aura of the infant ginseng. This trip wasn't in vain after all. The gray-clothed man sniffed the air, and a pair of gloomy eyes fell on Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. He grinned and said, "It seems that the infant ginseng is in your hands. You let these ants die first, and then you reap the benefits. You guys sure are scheming. Who are you?" Hearing this, Lin Yi's heart sank even more. Since the opponent was able to say this, it meant that he had already noticed them. It was just that the opponent's strength was far stronger than theirs. Therefore, Lin Yi and Chu Bubi didn't notice him at all. Thinking about this, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel scared. At the same time, he roughly understood the reason why this person waited until now to make a move. Aside from wanting to reap the benefits, the other reason should be because of the fog. It was obvious that the fog that was used to hide the infant ginseng was something the gray-clothed man couldn't see through. Otherwise, he would have taken the infant ginseng before the fog dissipated. He wouldn't have waited until now to ask for it. Chapter 4262. When Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao retreated, he was also forced to retreat. Just from the surface, it seemed like they were evenly matched. Two golden core stage ants were able to unleash such a powerful martial skill when they joined hands. It was comparable to the full power of a golden core stage master. Although the man in gray had the strength of a nascent soul stage master, he was too careless and underestimated his opponent. That was why he was in such a sorry state. He was forced into a tie by two golden core stage juniors. Even if it was only one move, it was still embarrassing enough. The man in gray's face immediately turned gloomy. The blood in his body surged. Only now did he realize that he was caught off guard and had suffered a small injury. He was really in a sorry state. If you have some skills. Two mere golden core stage beginners were able to withstand my two palms. You two should be proud. The man in gray didn't attack again. Instead, he stood 100 feet away and sneered. "It's a pity that the both of you can only stop here. A gold core stage expert who can survive after receiving my origin-shattering palm has never appeared in this world. Although the both of you are worthy of praise, it's a pity that you still can't escape death." Ha ha ha. "Oh, you're so confident?" Lin Yi was still sitting on the ground. His and Huang Xiaodao's faces didn't look good. However, after hearing the man in gray's words, he still raised his eyebrows and asked calmly, "Confident? Humph, what kind of confidence is this? It's just common sense. I can't deny that the power of your joint palm technique is indeed praiseworthy, but it's a pity that it's still very shallow. It's just a low-level palm technique that can only strike randomly." The man in gray sneered confidently. "Even if you can withstand my shattering energy palm on the surface, how can trash like you resist the damage to the primordial spirit? Your primordial spirit has obviously suffered heavy injuries, but you still insist on acting in front of me. I want to see how long you can last." Ha ha. Primordial spirit has suffered heavy injuries. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. He looked at the man in gray like he was looking at an idiot. There should be a limit to deceiving others and yourself, right? Which eye of yours can see that? Our primordial spirits are heavily injured? Without waiting for the other party to reply, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao had already stood up hand in hand. Both of them had relaxed expressions, not to mention injuries to their primordial spirits. They didn't even seem to have suffered any ordinary physical injuries. It was as if they were completely fine. How is this possible? The man in gray was dumbfounded and couldn't even speak properly. He had absolute confidence in his essence-shattering palm. Even if he was careless and did not use his full strength to attack, he could at least injure his opponent's essence spirit. In the time it took to say a few words, even Huang Xiaotao's injuries were healed. That was why he could appear so calm. However, the man in gray did not know this. In his eyes, he only knew that Lin, Yi, and Huang Xiaotao were facing the aura-shattering palm that he was most proud of. Whether it was their bodies or their primordial spirits, they were both unharmed. The meaning behind this was really chilling. All right, I'm not an unreasonable person. Since you've already proven your strength, then I admit that you have the qualifications to talk to me, the man in gray said in a deep voice. What do you mean? Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao were slightly startled. With this sentence, the pressure that the man in gray gave them instantly disappeared. Seeing that the two of them weren't soft persimmons that he could easily bully, he was prepared to negotiate. This guy's skin was really thick. The truth was so. To be able to reach the original infant stage, the man in gray's experience and battle experience was definitely incomparably rich. Even if he couldn't see through Lin, Yi, and Huang Xiaodao's trump card, he at least knew that these two people were definitely not as easy to deal with as he had imagined. If he continued to forcefully fight, although he believed that he had a higher chance of winning as an original infant stage expert, he would have to spend a lot of effort to deal with these two people just now. It was very likely that both of them would be injured. That wouldn't be worth it. What he was most afraid of was provoking a third party during the fight. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to get anything. It's very simple. According to the rules of the wilderness, whoever sees, it gets half. As long as you hand over half of the nascent ginseng, I will let the two of you go. Well, water does not interfere with river water, the man in gray said with certainty. Chapter 4263. Half of the witnesses? That's a little too much. Lin, he didn't directly refuse, but he didn't directly agree either. Instead, he revealed an awkward expression and frowned as if he was hesitating. Huang Xiaodao, who was at the side, didn't have any intention of speaking. Everything was decided by Lin Yi. She didn't participate in the decision-making and only listened to Lin Yi's instructions. Hearing Lin Yi's awkward tone, the man in gray didn't get angry. Instead, he was secretly happy. Listening to Lin Yi's words, there was a way. It was common knowledge that the higher a person's level was, the more they cherished their life. They wouldn't easily fight with others. This was human nature. If he was facing an original infant stage master, the man in gray might not hesitate to fight with his life. However, facing two golden core stage masters, it was like a billionaire wanting to die with a beggar on the side of the road. No matter how he thought about it, it was a big loss. Therefore, the man in gray wasn't afraid that Lin Yi would bargain with him. He was afraid that Lin Yi would be stubborn and fight with his life. In the end, both sides would suffer. This was definitely not a good thing for the man in gray. As long as you get half, you can go your own way, and I will go my own way. As long as you get half of it from now on, you can go your own way, and I'll go mine. I won't touch a single hair on your body. But if you don't give me half of it, then we'll have to fight to the death. Even if you have some skills, you're still only in the gold core stage. Just now, I was careless and held back, which allowed you to retreat. If we really fight, what do you think your chances of winning are? Lin Yi suddenly fell into hesitation. However, before the man in gray could secretly rejoice, he immediately said forcefully, "How many chances of winning are there? If we don't fight, how will we know? Fuck, what a stupid kid." Hearing this, the man in gray was furious. He couldn't wait to kill this kid who didn't know what was good for him. Let me give you a piece of advice. You better think carefully before you speak. I see you as the number one person. That's why I'm giving you a chance to discuss. The gray-clothed man really didn't want to fight to the death with Lin Yi and Lu Shang, so he could only continue to be patient. He said earnestly, "My patience is very limited. If you're just blindly pretending to be unreasonable It's hard to say if the two of you can walk out of here alive if we really fight. The pros and cons are so obvious. You can't possibly be unable to see clearly, can you? But the two of us went through untold hardships to obtain the nascent ginseng, and you want half of it the moment you arrive. Are you kidding me? He pursed his lips and pretended to be tough, but there was clearly some unconcealable wavering in his expression. If it was anyone else, they wouldn't be willing at this time. Chapter 4265. He couldn't help but exclaim. This was the will of the heavens. The man in gray was an original leveled cultivator, so the myriad crossing golden dan fruit was useless to him aside from trading. Yet it was found in his pouch. If this wasn't the will of the heavens, then what was it? Of course, no matter how lucky one was, one must have the ability to do so. If someone else was in Lin Yi's position, they would have been killed by the man in gray a long time ago. That wasn't good luck, it was bad luck. Okay, let's hurry up and leave. This place is far too dangerous. He placed the pouch inside his jade space and didn't dare to stay any longer. He didn't even care about his injuries and quickly left with Huang Xiaodao. He didn't really care. He just needed to hold Huang Xiaodao's hand and help her recover. Huang Xiaodao nodded. She knew that they couldn't stay here any longer and they had to leave as soon as possible. After such a big commotion, the man in gray was right in front of them. If they stayed any longer, who knew if another person would appear out of nowhere? This was the core area of Lufeng Forest. Other than Chu Bubi, who was an exception, those who could enter this place were all original level cultivators. This wasn't a joke. The two of them immediately fled, but they didn't dare to run around randomly. Instead, they followed the route that Chu Bubi had given them and retraced their steps. This was the only way to escape unscathed. Otherwise, if they were careless, they might run into the nest of a powerful spiritual beast. That would be a real joke. 2 hours later, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao were a few dozen miles away from the spiritual beast graveyard. They didn't encounter any accidents along the way, nor were there any people or spiritual beasts tailing them. The entire journey was peaceful. Okay, we should be fine now. Let's stop and rest. Let's heal our injuries before we leave. Lin Yi spoke. Huang Xiaodao was fine. While they were running, they were healing the remaining injuries in her body. However, he was still injured. Though it wasn't serious, it wasn't a good thing to drag it out for too long. He needed to heal himself as soon as possible. Yes. Huang Xiaodao nodded while gasping for breath. In such a dense forest, she had been running non-stop for 4 hours. She had been relying on the little bit of Zhen Qi in her body to support herself. If she did not quickly take a rest, she would definitely die. She couldn't hold on much longer. Lin Yi looked around and found a relatively clean big rock. He let Huang Xiaodao sit on it while he healed himself. After the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, the remaining injuries on his body had been completely swept away. Not only did his entire body feel relaxed, even his spirit, energy, and essence had become much better. Besides healing his injuries, He had also transferred a large amount of true energy to Huang Xiaodao. However, the problem was that he didn't come here to collect the nascent ginseng for his own use. It's over. It's over. It's over. The black-clothed man suddenly became anxious. He scratched his head and muttered to himself, "This is the key material for the research of gene medicine. Last time, the original infant ginseng failed to make the gene medicine. It's very likely that there's a problem with the gene imitation of the infant ginseng. I must find a real infant ginseng to find a way to remedy it. But now, when I go back, how do I explain it to Miss Luan?" Creating a nascent soul stage master was the most important project in the headquarters recently. If the whole project came to a standstill because of a bad start and dragged on for a long time, it might even be aborted halfway. This was a huge responsibility that no one could afford to bear. When he thought of this serious consequence, the black-clothed man suddenly felt a chill down his spine. He was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. The organization's cruel means of punishment was really not something that an ordinary person could bear. Damn it! If I find out who took the infant ginseng first, I will tear him into pieces. The black-clothed man gritted his teeth and shouted angrily. This way, the vitality and freshness of the spiritual herbs could be guaranteed to the greatest extent. Lin Yi's actions, however, didn't look like he was being careful at all. He looked like he was pulling weeds out of the ground, and he didn't even prepare a special jade box. He was just pulling out casually. Huang Xiaodao broke out in a cold sweat as she watched. She couldn't help but think, what a waste. Oh, that's fine. Lin Yi shook his head indifferently, but his hands did not stop at all. Actually, many spiritual herbs will dry up after being pulled out of the soil for a long time. If you don't store them in a special spiritual jade box, it's useless no matter how much you pull them out. Huang Xiaodao reminded weakly. Hee, I know this. Xiaodao, don't worry. I have my ways. You just have to do as I say. Lin, he suddenly smiled. Other people had to be careful when collecting spiritual herbs. However, he had the space in the jade pendant. He could easily pull out the spiritual herbs on the ground. As long as he put them into the space in the jade pendant, there would be no problem. There was naturally infinite spiritual energy in the jade pendant, which could allow these spiritual herbs to continue to grow. In the future, whenever he needed them, he could look for them in the space in the jade pendant. He could guarantee that the quality would only be better than when he collected them. This was an effect that others could not achieve no matter how well they prepared. Oh, okay then. Seeing that Lin Yi was so confident, Huang Xiaotao nodded obediently and did not continue to ask. She also copied Lin Yi and used this unprecedented rough style to pull weeds. Therefore, only a few people can go there. It's not as much as you think. Oh? However, according to common sense, even if not many people went there, everyone would try their best to plunder all the treasures. In this way, only the first few people would be able to obtain the treasures. It should be very difficult for those who go after that to gain much, right? Lin, he was still somewhat disapproving. What kind of attitude is that? With Brother Chang's status, talking to a country bumpkin like you is condescending. Do you understand? You don't believe one or two. He really didn't want to face I gave him. You. The coquettish woman next to Brother Chang curled her lips and said disdainfully. However, before she could finish, Brother Chang turned around and glanced at her. Instantly, his eyebrows drooped. He immediately lowered his eyebrows and did not dare to say another word. When Lin Yi saw this scene, he could not help but secretly shake his head. Even his Taoist companion was so afraid of him. It could be seen that this Brother Chang was really not an approachable person. However, such a person was actually so amiable to an outsider he did not know. Moreover, he was a beginner of the gold elixir realm who was not even on the same level as him. It was really incomprehensible. There must be a reason for this. This person might be another Chu Booby. What little brother said is actually not unreasonable. However, the scale of the ruins is larger than that of an ordinary human city. With just a few waves of human cultivators, it is impossible to collect all the treasures in a short period of time. Therefore, the treasures buried in the ruins will not be completely plundered. Brother Chong turned his head and said to Lin Yi, and his expression became calm and warm again. He was indeed interested in the Star Ink milk, but this Brother Chong in front of him was inexplicably so attentive. He felt that there was something strange about it. After all, the example of Chu Booby was right in front of him, so he had to be on guard. With Lin Yi's shrewdness, he would definitely be able to find a flaw in the other party's words if they were all lies. But if he was like Chu Booby, who could mix the real with the fake, then it would be impossible to guard against. Lin Yi was hesitating. The ghostly thing's voice rang out in his mind again. What he said is true. Even though I haven't personally come to Lufing Forest, I've heard people talk about the Star Ink milk produced in Outwa Cultivation City. It should be true. This thing is something that you can only find by chance. You might as well go and give it a try. With the ghostly thing, the elder of the Spirit Beast clan, vouching for him, Lin immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He nodded inwardly, somewhat tempted. Little brother, what do you think? It can be considered a kind of fate for you to meet me here. If you miss this opportunity, you might lose the opportunity to obtain the Star Ink milk in the future. You might even regret it. Brother Chong saw that Lin Yi was tempted and struck while the iron was hot. Well, then I want to ask again. How much is there? If we join, will it be enough for so many people? Lin Yi asked carefully. In his opinion, there would definitely not be many rare items like the Star Ink milk. Furthermore, there were already 6 people in the other party. If the 2 of them joined in, it was hard to say whether they would be able to get share. Comparing the strength of the 2 parties, even if Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao joined forces, they would not be able to contend against the 6 of them. If they couldn't even drink the soup, then they could only blame their bad luck and work for nothing. Little brother, your suspicions are not without reason. However, in my opinion, there is no need to worry too much. According to what my friend in charge of the spiritual beast said, the formation protecting the Star Ink milk has not been open for 3 years, so it should have accumulated quite a bit. Brother Chong solemnly vowed. Then, how will we split it? Lin Yi continued to ask. Even if there was a lot of Star Ink milk, it still depended on how they were going to split it. If this Brother Chong asked for 8 to 10 caddies of Star Ink milk, and he had his Dao companions by his side, when it came to the 2 of them, it would definitely be difficult. Hee, you don't have to worry about this. We agreed that everyone can only fill 1 bottle at the beginning. As Brother Chong spoke, he took out a small spiritual jade bottle. The volume was not large, only the size of a bottle of floral water in the secular world. He smiled and said, according to the order of joining the team, I will start first, then everyone will take it in turn. The 2 of you join last, so naturally, you will have to wait until the end to take it. I believe that little brother can understand this, but I believe that there should be enough Star Ink milk. At the very least, the 2 of you will have 1 bottle left. Brother Chong did not directly pat his chest and say it, because that would make people not believe him. Saying it like this now seemed more pertinent and easier to win people's trust. Lin Yi thought for a moment. This division was fair. After all, the 2 of them had joined temporarily. Whether it was strength or relationship, they were not as good as the others. It was reasonable for them to have the last priority. As long as the other party did not do the deceitful thing of taking all the Star Ink milk in 1 scoop, there should be some gains according to this distribution method. If there was nothing, then they could only blame their bad luck. Of course, this did not rule out another possibility. That was Brother Chong broke his promise. That would be a big problem. However, since they had come out to take the risk, they could not escape this risk in any case. If they really pursued perfection, they could only hide at home and not come out. Well, we will join. Thank you for your care. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao looked at each other and finally nodded in confirmation. Great, little brother is really extraordinary. You did not let me down. Brother Chong suddenly laughed after hearing this. The reason why he was willing to spend so much effort was to let Lin, Yi, and Huang Xiaodao join the team together. If Lin, Yi finally backed down and admitted defeat, it would really be a waste of time. Chapter 4272. You flatter me. I am Ling Yi, and this is junior sister Huang from the same sect. How should I address you? Lin Yi took the initiative to introduce himself. Since he had decided to join the group, even if he was secretly on guard, he still had to do something to show his face. I am Chong Daoping. You two think highly of me. You can call me Brother Chong. Chong Daoping nodded faintly and then said to the other 5 people, you guys should also introduce yourselves. My name is Chao Shishir. The beautiful woman next to Lin Yi glanced at them with disdain. However, since Chong Daoping had spoken, they could only do as he said. They reluctantly said their names and were too lazy to say anything else. Luo Taoxiang. Next was a younger brother at the peak of the late stage of the Gold Core realm. He was arrogant and didn't put Lin Yi and the other 2 little ants in his eyes. In contrast, Chong Daoping, a master of the original infant stage, was much more magnanimous than him. The other 3 people didn't say much and just said their names. 2 men and 1 woman were Hu Youli, Fan Dongji, and Fang Miaojin. These people mocked Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao the moment they arrived. Now that they were afraid of Chong Daoping's power, they didn't dare to say anything. However, it was too much to expect them to be nice. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao only nodded faintly, not taking it to heart. They didn't have the habit of being snubbed, and Chong Daoping was the leader of the team. It didn't matter if their relationship with these people was good or bad. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao only nodded faintly, not taking it seriously. Chong Daoping didn't say much. He deliberately invited Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao to join the group. Naturally, he had his own reasons. As long as he could achieve his goal, everything else didn't matter. As for how everyone got along with each other, it was not something he needed to care about. No matter how tense the atmosphere was, it didn't matter as long as they didn't piss off Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. All right, let's go. Chong Daoping commanded and immediately led the way. Chao Shishir and the others followed closely behind without saying a word. In the end, Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao looked at each other and followed behind the crowd. Chong Daoping led the way at an extremely fast speed. He was clearly shuttling through the dense forest, and his footsteps were clearly not hurried, but his speed was inexplicably fast. One moment he was here, and the next moment he was 50 feet away. If the people behind him were not Golden Core Stage experts, if it was a Foundation Establishment expert, even if it was a Foundation Establishment expert who had completed the Foundation Establishment realm, they might not even be able to keep up with Chong Daoping's footsteps, let alone others. Chapter 4273. Are we out of the Lufeng Forest? Chao Shishir couldn't help but ask after being stunned for a moment. Everyone else also looked at each other. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao looked at each other, not understanding what was going on. The wasteland in front of them seemed endless, and while they knew that it wasn't quite possible, they couldn't help but think the same way as Chao Shishir. Was Chong Daoping leading the way too fast and accidentally leading everyone out of Lufeng Forest? How is that possible? Listen up, this is the ruins of Ao Duo Cultivation City. Chong Daoping chuckled and pointed at the empty wasteland in front of them. Everyone was stunned. They opened their mouths wide and said in surprise, "What kind of ruins is this? It's just a wasteland, there's nothing here?" Their initial excitement immediately dissipated. If it was really as Chong Daoping said, that this place was the ruins of the legendary Ao Duo Cultivation City, then everyone was really disappointed. What kind of treasures could there be in such a barren place? Even if there was, they could see it at a glance. How could they have the chance to look for it now? Huang Xiaodao gently pulled on Lin Yi's sleeve. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. Even she couldn't help but suspect that Chang Daoping deliberately brought everyone to this barren place. Did he have some ulterior motives? Perhaps this person had the same sinister intentions as Chu Booby? No matter how they looked at it, it was too ridiculous to say that this place was the ruins of Ao Duo Cultivation City. Even a 3-year-old child wouldn't believe it. However, after being surprised for a moment, Lin Yi calmed down. Even if Chang Daoping had ulterior motives, he wouldn't deceive everyone like this. At first glance, the place in front of them seemed to be a wasteland, as if there really was nothing there. However, if they used their divine sense to perceive it, they would find that there seemed to be a giant wall in front of them. Divine sense couldn't penetrate it all. There must be something mysterious here. While everyone was puzzled, Luo Taoxiang seemed to have sensed something. He immediately raised the corner of his mouth and wanted to show off in front of everyone. He stepped forward. Chang Daoping shouted coldly, "Come back. Do you want to get lost in there and never see the light of day for the rest of your life?" "What? Isn't this a smokescreen?" Luo Taoxiang was startled and quickly retreated. He could also feel that this place was unusual. "I thought it was just a smokescreen to fool people." "Illusion?" Chang Daoping scoffed and responded, "I've already told you that this is the Odor Cultivation City's ruin. Do you think the Spirit Beast's former important city would use such a childish trick like a smokescreen?" Luo Taoxiang shrunk his neck in embarrassment. When the others heard this, they finally reacted and looked at Chang Daoping. Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao, who had been separated from their teammates, were naturally excellent candidates in Chang Daoping's eyes. Firstly, they met the requirements of the number of people. Secondly, their strength was only at the early Golden Core stage. They could meet the requirements of breaking the formation, and, at the same time, they couldn't do anything with their strength. It was easy to use and safe, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It was precisely because of this that Chang Daoping, who had always been strong and overbearing, was so enthusiastic to Lin Yi and Huang Xiaodao. In the end, it was all for the sake of breaking the formation. After figuring this out, Lin Yi's vigilance against Chang Daoping was slightly relaxed. If what he said about breaking the formation was true, then he didn't have to worry too much. At least, he could ensure that he wouldn't be like Chu Booby, who was tricked by him into offering sacrifices and died in vain. After all, the original purpose of setting up the Lunar Shadow Array was for the Spirit Beast clan to hide and protect Aodwa Cultivation City. They could not possibly offer sacrifices to 8 experts every time they entered the city, right? That would be too ridiculous. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.